Kia koutou kua taimai ki tēnei hui. Good morning and welcome everyone to this meeting and to our submitters who've come to join us and present today. We're very grateful to have you in our midst and sharing your concerns and thoughts about the public transport plan, which we'll be getting to. I just want to start, if we can, in the traditional way with our opening karakia, which is on the screen. I'll lead it. I don't think we have Api here this morning, but I'll lead it. The words, we'll just do the Māori version there in front of you. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tōna. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā tara ki tai. E hi aki ana te atakura, hei tio, hei huka, hei hauhu, ti e moriora. And before we go any further, I would just like to acknowledge, I think, the passing of our head of state, to acknowledge in a very small way the incredibly long-standing, dedicated and selfless service to the Commonwealth of our monarch, Queen Elizabeth II. And I would ask that as a small recognition of that service, we observe now 70 seconds of silence, 1 second for each year of her reign.
Like it.
Thank you, everyone. Returning now to our agenda, are there any apologies? Oh, are there any notices? Just looking at who we've got on the screen up there.
We've got Jag Pano, Paul Michelson, Sean McKinlay and Tony Milton.
All right.
Oh, Napier City Council.
All right. In terms of housekeeping, this meeting is being live streamed on Council's Facebook page and recorded for viewing at a later date on our YouTube channel. In the event of an earthquake, drop cover and hold, and if the shaking is long or strong, when the shaking subsides, leave the building through the nearest exit and proceed immediately toward Napier Hill along Dalton Street to Tiffin Park, continuing up the steps to Cameron Road. If an emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area, which is on the grass at the corner of Dalton and Vautier Streets, and emergency exits are clearly signposted, as I say. The council chamber is currently designated as a public place, and the council's policy is that 1 metre physical distancing is required and face masks must be worn when physical distancing is not possible. Now, the wharepaku, the toilets are down the hall. It actually says to the left here, but you turn right when you go out that door, and they are straight ahead of you. All right. Do we have any conflict of interest declarations? Oh, okay. I'd like to move to the minutes of the 10 June meeting. Would someone be prepared to move that they are a true and correct record of that meeting?
Just a question from me, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
In the resolutions, it refers 3.2 to the establishment of a regional active transport committee. I'm not necessarily disputing that wasn't suggested, but it's, my question is, I think there already is one.
So this is the minutes of the last meeting.
Yep.
Paragraph.
Requests the group manager, transport manager and governance team provide further advice to this meeting on the two principal options being presented, being a technical advisory group to include representatives from, and the establishment of a regional active transport committee.
Yes, now I think that was referring to the specific proposal for, and the terms of reference that were appended to the minutes, appended to the agenda of the last meeting, which was proposing a regional active transport committee comprising a range of governance and technical advisory group members for each local authority along with BICON. It was a formal structure, and I do think that that is the correct reference. There was a specific proposal in front of us then.
Right. Thank you for that clarity.
All right. So with that clarification, could someone move that those minutes are approved for review? Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Any seconder? Thank you very much, Mayor Walker. All in favour?
Aye.
Any against? Carried. Right, into the agenda for this morning. Before we get to submissions, we just really want to firstly have a look at the follow-ups. Now, does anyone from the staff wish to speak to those follow-ups? Are they presumably reasonably self-evident? Are there any questions about them?
A question from me?
Sure.
And my apologies, I have had a bit of a week from you-know-where with my reading. So the strategic case for freight and logging to be reported upon this meeting, is that going to be covered in, I see it's NZTA, is that going to be covered off where we're up to with the NZTA strategic case for freight and logging? I don't recall reading it, that's all.
No, it's just a general update on progress, and I'm happy to take any questions during our presentation.
All right. Now, do we need to move that those be received or just noted?
Yes, we need something.
Okay, well, I'll move that we note the follow-ups from the previous meeting. Anyone want to second that? Thank you, Councillor Lambert. All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? Any minor items? Anyone have any minor items they wish to raise? All right, well, that being the case, it's bang on 9:10, which is when we need to move to our deputation. And we have Walter Brewstead with us to talk about transport decarbonisation. Welcome, Walter. Come and join us at the end of the table.
Mr. Chair, may I make a few introductory comments?
Absolutely.
To everyone, Walter has presented to the Hastings District Council several times over possibly the last 3 years that I recall. And we have always found the information that he provides us, although sometimes high level, we see that there are things that we can actually do today in our communities to make our world a better place. So when Walter spoke to the Eco Districts team at Council and myself, I thought this was a really good next step for him to come and share his true expertise with us.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. That's great context. Now, Walter, I'm afraid you've only got 5 minutes, but we have got the slides in front of us, and the floor is yours. I won't waste any more of your time.
I know time is always a question, therefore I will do this very short. Let me start with myself. I worked in Europe as architect and engineer, mainly consulting by the government in the area of energy conservation and urban design. And there we touched also transport, but for some of this, my presentation, I also consulted traffic engineers. Our government is focused mainly on, at the moment, on electric cars to promote this, and that means our country will spend a lot of money on electric cars, which is, from my point of view, for the broad population correct, For people who are driving less, it's not correct, just in brackets, to produce one silicium battery in cost about 4 to 7 tons of CO2 in the production. So that means these are upfront CO2 costs. Therefore, like in town planning and any other areas, there are chances to save money. Unnecessary idling. This is, from my point of view, one important point. Any more than 10 seconds idling a car engine will burn more fuel than turning engine off and starting again. This is public knowledge published around the world. I contacted in 2019 the transport minister, and I received the following answer, or first the question, what are countries doing around the world? In London, in England, stationary idling is an offence under the Road Traffic Act. England, Wales and Scotland, leaving your engine running while parking on a road or in a public place could land you with a fine. Westminster City Council has issued within 2 years 39 penalty charge notices between 20 and 80 pounds. I sent this to the government and I got the answer. At present, the government is not investing legislation around vehicle idling, as it is not considered to have a notable impact on air quality. This was 2020, and today you can find published from the government, emission from idling engine have been linked to major health concern, including, and then a list up to down to even cancer. The last sentence, I think it's very important. Children are particularly vulnerable because their health system are still developing, which makes idling a real issue around schools. Picking up children, you see this, they are always idling. Now, my point is, if you focus on the general public, it's hard to change the perception of behavior. But courier companies could be reached quite easily here in this region. And I made a little bit investigation. A standard courier car is idling between 150 to 300 times a day, and they are idling between half a minute and 5 minutes. I assessed this together with engineers and background information, for instance, idling CO2 emission from idling a diesel engine, 1 liter is creating 2.6 kg CO2. This doesn't say much, but if we bring this in the connection, and I calculated this very cautious, idling 150 times a day, not 5 minutes, only 1.5 minutes. They are delivering 5 to 6 days a week. I calculated only with 5 days a week. And the result is a standard courier car is emitting 2.6 up to 3.1 tons of CO2 per year. And they are wasting, the last figure, $2,400 cost if they pay $2.5 per liter. Comparing this with an electric car, the electric car can save 2.1 to 2.8 tons compared to a petrol car driving 10,000 Ks. I don't have to tell you how much you have to invest for an electric car. So my suggestion is that the regional council can encourage regional courier companies to take part in a one-year reduction program. And this should hear a few steps. You may invite the CEOs and make workshops for the drivers of the van, and over a month they collect how much they are driving, and after 3 years, 3 months, make the first assessment. And to make this attractive, there should be a winner and a draw and some awards. And after 1 year, this could be celebrated. That this idea of a championship, and the emission, if only 30 vans would take part in such a program, we could save here in the region 80 to 90 tons of CO2 emission a year, and the amount of $60,000 to $75,000 petrol costs.
Thank you, Walter. I'm going to have to stop you there, but I think you've made...
I'm through. I only wanted to show you the last picture. Championships are done around the world. This is an example from Austria.
Hey, look, thank you. Look, can I just say this? Your presentation was incredibly timely. We are looking at an emissions reduction plan as a council. I will be passing on your information to Pippa McKelvey-Cebolo, who's our climate change ambassador, who will be advising the council on that program. So thank you for taking the time to do all of that work and put that together and bring it to us. I really genuinely appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We better move into the submissions now.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
I have a schedule of submitters that I'm hoping isn't going to be too much of a surprise to those attending in front of me. The first submitter I have is Anders Christofferson. Yeah, I should have said, just come up to the table. That's the easiest way we can see and hear from you. Now, the way this works, for the benefit of those, for yourself, Anders, and you've got 10 minutes, within which, if there is time after you've presented, we will ask any questions we've got of you. Now, we won't be entering into discussion or dialogue or debate or anything like that, because next week, once we've had a chance to reflect on all of the submissions that have been presented today, the information that's been presented today, alongside the written submissions we've received, we will go into deliberations in a week's time. So this is really just the opportunity for you to speak and for us to listen and ask any questions, but it all has to be within the 10 minutes, and I'm sorry, we have to be very strict about that, or we're just not going to be fair to everyone and get through the day. So what I'm going to do, and I know the governance team will help me with this, is that we'll be setting a timer, and I might let you know when you're getting up to, say, 8 minutes, so that you know if you want to allow some time for questions, you can, or if you just want to use the whole 10 minutes, go. All right, so that's for the benefit of everyone who's here. I won't have to do that each time. Maybe I'll do that again after the morning tea break for some new submitters if they arrive. And as with all of that said, welcome and thank you again to all of you for taking the time to submit to our public transport plan. We're really grateful for that. It's really important to us to hear the community voice on this. Your time starts now.
Yeah, so I think when I saw the proposal, I had a read through it, and I was generally in favour of most of it. I'm particularly keen on the idea of buses going beyond 6 p.m. or until 9 p.m. and then in the proposal it says until midnight in 2030. I think, quite rightly, as is stated in the proposal, that would open up to more activities being accessible by public transport. And I'm also very much in favour of the stuff that's said about increasing the plans to increase frequency of buses so that we don't have those hour-long waits and everything. So I think as far as the plan goes, I'm pretty much in favour of it all. my only, concern really is that sort of thinking, how are you going to get, I suppose, the drivers to make it happen? I mean, because I know that getting enough drivers to make the system work has been a real issue for this service. As we've seen with the frequent cancellations that we've seen in recent weeks. And but I think essentially I think if you can get the drivers to make it happen, then yeah, fantastic, really. And I mean, as far as everything that is in the proposal, I support it, and I think it would really enhance our bus system here in the Hawke's Bay, to have that increased frequency and night buses, or going until 9 p.m. It would just help a lot of people who might not have a car or whatever to get around at night and increase their options. So essentially, I'm for it. My only concern is how do we get the drivers to make it happen, basically.
Right.
So that's it, really.
Thank you. And are you a regular bus user yourself? Or?
I am, yeah.
So was this one of the first submissions that you've made in a process like this?
Yeah. I've never really done something like this before. No.
I'm really interested that you have, because in people's busy lives to actually take the time to engage in a process like this is significant. So thank you for doing that. I'm not sure if there are any other questions of you, but the question I had, you've answered, that you are a regular user, and I quite understand your concern. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. This is probably going to be a general question from me throughout the day. I'm interested in the timeliness of the changes, and because some of the changes are not going to come in for several years. So if we brought those changes forward, do you think ratepayers should pay more for the service? So not more in the ticket to the bus, but more in their rates, so that the whole population pays more in their rates, so we can make these services more available sooner.
Well, I mean, if it's quickened it up a bit as far as making these changes happen sooner, then a certain amount of rate increases may be necessary. But I mean, I don't really know the sort of numbers you're talking about as far as what those rate increases would be or anything like that. But it may be necessary, I suppose, would be my answer.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Dijk.
I've got a similar standard question that I'll be asking most submitters. Great that you're actually submitting here today. It's a good thing that the public actually comes in front and ask and also give your views. So obviously you're a regular public transport user. Have you ever noticed that you're sitting in a bus, although these days when you sit in public transport, you're normally on your device or you have your AirPods in because we've got that luxury now. Have you ever been on a bus where the bus driver wants to pull out but actually had to wait until there actually was a gap in the traffic? So they actually slowed the whole process down. Have you come across that? And it's a leading question while you're thinking about this, because I believe public transport should actually have right of way at any time, because there is a schedule to be had, and that's how they operate in Europe. So as soon as a bus puts its indicator out, everybody stops, public transport goes first, because you've got a schedule. And so the bus driver needs to keep to a schedule. Have you ever come across it that you sat on the side of the road waiting for the bus to be able to pull out?
It's not something that I've particularly noticed. If I'm honest with you, I suppose it might have happened every now and then, but I can't say it's something I've particularly noticed,
Okay.
I suppose, no.
No, I can imagine. Maybe from now on you will.
Maybe.
Happy, have you got any questions?
Is there a preference for this type of transport to be on say, on the weekend, Friday or Saturday evening?
I wouldn't say I have a preference for any particular day of the week, no.
Okay, kia ora.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, I'd just like to thank you for, again, taking the time to engage in the process and bringing your perspectives to the attention. And we're acutely aware of the, frankly, disappointing for everyone concerned challenges presented by worker shortages over the COVID period. And it really hasn't, it's been the very last thing we've wanted our public transport service to have to present to the public trying to use it, because it's just so frustrating for everyone. So understand, and we will equally make sure we're geared up for the expansion, the step change ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right, our next submitter, I have Tiara Bergstrom.
Tēnā koutou,
Morena Tiara.
tēnā koutou katoa, ko Tiara Bergstrom, tōku ingoa, ko Pakiaho. I've timed my little talk, it is 10 minutes or under. Okay, so I was guessing that most submissions will be very useful facts and figures, and I thought I'd tell you a backstory. Most of my life I've lived rurally, both in the UK and in New Zealand. And of course, that meant car trips. In the arrogance of my earlier youth, I assumed everyone had a car, except my weird aunt who never learnt to drive and had to live on a bus route. After a short stint in London, my husband and I moved to Havelock North in the mid-80s, and we brought with us our first daughter and her pushchair. We arrived at Auckland Airport on a hot January day to be met by some incredibly kind family members of Seth's new employer. How are you going to get to Havelock, they said. We replied we thought we'd catch the train to Hastings and then catch the bus to Havelock. They rapidly assured us this was not possible and ushered us across to the domestic terminal and put us on a plane. That was only my second flight ever in my life. They arranged for another family member to pick us up in Napier and take us to our new flat in Havelock North. No one had told us that flats were unfurnished in New Zealand. Just like in those pre-internet days, we had no idea how expensive cars were here in New Zealand at the time. We'd left behind a 2-year-old Mini, and here we'd only be getting a 1950s Morris Minor, if we were lucky. There was nothing to be done but walk. No one walked the Havelock Hastings main road then, even though it was a lot less busy. We must have looked weird because everyone stared as they drove past us as we pushed our pushchair to the supermarket, to the play centre, later laden with 2 children, and they went like this. We marvelled at the car culture here, where people would hop in their car to drive 2 blocks to buy a bottle of milk from the dairy. But we gradually got absorbed into the car culture. We bought a succession of 50s and 60s Morris Minors, sent the kids to the dairy to buy the milk. It was good for them to walk. And then we moved 20 kilometres out of town, and car life began in earnest. 5 children worth of play centre runs, lessons, school runs, sport runs, ballet lessons, reading lessons, doctor's appointments, dentist appointments, optician appointments. At least 3 trips in and out of town was normal, and I and the children lived in the car. Then 10 years ago, we got a job in a village in France, renovating an old house. This was a life-changing experience in many ways, but all of a sudden I was in a village with no car. There was a small range of shops. It was a bit like Waipawa, and a train station 2-kilometre walk away, which would take me to the next town for the supermarket. I was in a culture where it was normal to walk half an hour to the train station, to take the train to the next village, to the small town, or right into the city. From early morning, there was a steady flow of people going along the footpath to catch the train. office workers, factory workers, tertiary students, school children, older people in the middle of the day with their shopping carts off to the supermarket. Weekends, there were hikers and the lycra-clad with their cycles heading out to the trails. The train ran early morning to late night every 15 minutes. And although our village was at the very end of the 80-kilometre train line, because of this train, everyone felt connected and any age or ability could use it. Anyone could just walk up and take the train, and take it they did. After 25 years of driving myself and my children in and out of town multiple times a day, I loved not driving. It was so restful. I could sit and stare out the window, read a book, chat to someone, snooze on my way to town. The children there took themselves to school, sports, music lessons on the train, instead of their mothers having to drive them everywhere. Apparently, and this is not super comparable, but that line has 165 million journeys a year, and a lot of them are short 10 to 20-minute trips to the next town. It's an awful lot of car journeys not happening. This take the train thing I had more implications than I first realised. I got healthier walking to the station. I was less stressed not having to race the traffic. I felt I had so much more time. Returning to Marae Totara and my commuter lifestyle, shuttling son number 6 in and out of school, sports and appointments, made me wish for a less car-orientated lifestyle. Then in August 2020, I had a major concussion, and all of a sudden, for the first time since I was 17, I couldn't drive. I developed a bit more empathy for those who, due to age, infirmity or cost, also couldn't drive. It made me very aware of how isolated and reliant on the car I was. Although my driving returned in a reasonable time frame, I decided I wanted to move somewhere I could walk to the shops or cycle, nearer to family and in a small, vibrant community. We had 2 daughters already in Ōtāne, so Waipoua was a natural choice. It even had a foursquare, which promptly burnt down after we got there. But, like my perfect French village, my perfect Kiwi village has a great range of shops and services, and even a clock with bells. It also has a railway line and a very, very busy main road. So nowhere is an island these days, and central Hawke's Bay is no exception. People drive in and out all day long for school, work, shopping, social and recreational activities. You could keep enlarging the road, and they've done a good job just recently, but I believe we have a unique opportunity to change the culture in this part of Hawke's Bay from a car culture to a train culture. When you want to change a culture, you start with the young. So instead of the bus to school, they could use the train. The CHB students that feed into CHB College, the St John's and other Hastings Napier pupils, apparently 50 to 60, thank you, could take the train. A train and then a bus link to EIT for the tertiary students to save those tertiary students moving out of the area. The advantages of a train for people who work in Hastings or Napier is you could take your bike for the last leg of your journey, as connections to further bus services are always a weak point. I think to change a car culture to a public transport culture, there needs to be a wholehearted transformation. A half-pie job of a couple of buses morning and night is not going to make a meaningful impact on anyone, let alone the state of the road. It will absorb a reasonable amount of money and not a lot of results. With a train service that ran every 20 minutes, so if you missed a train, you just waited for the next, we have a real chance of changing this corner of New Zealand. Remember how I said when we used to walk from Havelock to Hastings 35 years ago, everyone stared at us? No one walked that road those days. Then someone built what surely has to be the most expensive cycle footpath in New Zealand, and now it's busy all day long. We already have a railway line, and will the Hawke's Bay Regional Council take some visionary action and run a small train, we don't need the massive freight engine, up and down the line from maybe Takapo for the Silver Fern Farms, maybe the new mushroom farm, Waipokro, Waipoua, how about a request stop for Mr. Apple, Ōtāne, Hastings, Clyde, Napier and Ahuriri. to be popular with the cruise lot. Make it easier to use. No need to remember timetables. Just walk down to the platform and take the next train. Accept the fact that sometimes of the day the carriages may be standing room only, and sometimes they might be more sparsely filled. Let people take their bike, their dog, and I'm confident we are no different from the people in the little French village who loved and used their train and left their cars at home. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Te Ara. Very clear, very evocative, and your message was well shared, and I'm sure received. We don't have a lot of time for questions.
That's cool.
The question I was going to ask is, what is it that is different about being on a train? If there was a bus every 20 minutes rather than a train every 20 minutes, and you could do that at a tenth the cost, would you get the same kind of culture change that you're talking about here? You could still relax and read on the bus as you can on the train, for example.
I honestly don't think you would, and I don't know if it's public transport snobbery or the fact that you can take a bike and a dog and whatever on a train, which makes it a lot more user-friendly. You can wheel your shopping cart on. It's a lot easier for old people to get on and off a train, with a flat platform rather than, clambering up steps. You're still stuck in the traffic on that state highway. It's like, a train would be.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you
I
very
wouldn't
much.
use a bus.
We better leave it there and
Thank
hear
you.
from our next submitter. Thank you again for the time and effort in preparing that.
When are you writing the next chapter? Because I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, it was a good.
It was really entertaining.
It was good.
Great, best submission I've heard so far. Well, entertaining wise anyway.
All right. Thank you for your enthusiasm there, Councillor Van Beek. Our next submitter is Glenys Libby. Welcome, Glenys. You know the rules. You heard the speech, and the floor is yours.
Hi.
The floor is yours. I'll let you know when you've spoken for about 8 minutes if you get to
Is
that.
it okay if I stand up?
You're more than welcome to stand up. Please
Can you
don't.
hear me all right? Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Marjorie Libby, tōku mama, tō Tom Libby, tōku papa, ko Glenys Libby aho. I am from Clive. My mother was born in Clive, and her father was born in Clive, and her grandfather was from Clive. And my father has lived in Clive since 1956, when he married my mother and he was 26. And he is now 91, has lived in Clive the rest of his life. I've got a long history with Clive because of my mum and my grandparents and my great-grandparents. I now live in Hastings, and I've come to talk about the lack of bus services between Clive, Hastings and Napier, Clive and districts really. I can remember as a teenager being able to catch the bus from the end of our road and either go to Napier or Hastings. And I used to go quite often as a teenager to the shops with my sister or some friends, and we'd go shopping in Hastings or Napier. We used to go to netball on the weekends, and it actually made us very resilient and independent as teenagers. There was a lot of cost benefits because mum and dad didn't have to take us everywhere. We could do it independently. And I think now parents, we don't want our children to be wrapped in cotton wool and having to be taken everywhere. We want them to be able to catch the bus. We want them to be able to sort themselves out, to read a timetable, organise their money, go on a bus and get somewhere and get home independently without their parents holding their hand all the way. My father's 91, he's now stopped driving, and I'm not saying he would be a candidate for catching the bus, but there are many people in Clive who are elderly or older, cannot drive anymore, and they would love to be able to catch a bus. One bus at 8 o'clock in the morning coming back at 5 o'clock at night does not cut it. I would catch the bus out to Clive to visit my father, but I am not catching the bus at 8 o'clock in the morning and not going home till 5 o'clock at night. That is not fair. Also in Clive, there is a lot of transitional housing. There's motels with transitional housing. There's quite a lot of camping grounds in Clive and districts. And I'm sure a lot of those people do not have access to vehicles. So they are stuck in Clive or Hamoana or Tiawanga or Clifton or Whakatū or Mangatiritiri or Whandon. They are stuck. There's only limited shopping in Clive. There's a Four Square, which prices are expensive. There is a very good vegetable and fruit shop. There's no butchers anymore. There's a dairy and a chemist. There's no banking facilities besides an EFTPOS machine at the service station. Another point I wanted to bring up was equity. What is fair? Clive people and Clive and Districts people all pay a levy towards public transport. What do they get for their money? It's a bit like they pay, some of them pay $100 a year for dredging. The dredging has not happened for over 12 years. So there's their $1,000, $1,200 sitting somewhere not being used, and they're paying for that dredging and it's just not happening. Meanwhile, their river is suffering, and I don't think that's fair either. And it's a bit like, I was just thinking this morning, what was equity? It's like people in Havelock or Flaxmere or Napier or Hastings or Taradale all get a piece of toast. Their piece of toast has bread on it. It might have some jam, might have peanut butter, make it even better. What do the people in Clive and Districts get? They don't even get the piece of toast. They get nothing because they're paying towards the transport thing and they're getting absolutely nothing for it. My vision for the future would be, like Katie explained at our last public meeting in Clive, about there would be a public system for Clive people and Hamwana and them. And like perhaps the other lady with the trains, that you could take your bus, your dog on it, and your bike, and your shopping trolley. You've just got to be fair for everybody. It's not fair that Clive gets nothing. They have sat and been quiet for a very long time. That is not fair. It's not equitable. And my father often says to me, Clive used to have the best bus service in New Zealand. He would take the bus from Clive to Napier to work. My mother would take the bus from Clive to Napier to work when she was a teenager. There's nothing like that now. One bus at 8 o'clock in the morning, coming back at 5. That's not fair for Clive people or anyone. And I just think you're missing out a big opportunity to train children to use public transport. You want it to keep going for their whole life, to be out of that car culture, start when they're little. Go with mum and dad on the bus, 2 things. Then they do it when they get older, and they do it with their children, and their children do it. So that's what I think's for the future. You've actually got to change people's culture to using public transport. As an early childhood teacher, I used to teach at Kiwi Kids in Hastings, and we would quite often catch the bus. We'd take our children on the bus to the library or the supermarket, and that was the highlight of their day, was going on a bus trip. And if you can give children that magic of public transport, being in a bus, it's really exciting for children to be in a bus. If you can give them that now when they're little, they're going to keep going with it and going with it and going with it, right until they are older. And it's making it fair for everybody, that they can all catch something to get somewhere. You know, you've got kids in Flaxmere that have never been to the beach. Never. Why? It's just not fair for people. So, and my last little thing is, Api, would you like to come and help me sing Tu Tera Mai? Because...
I'd love to. Yes, come on.
May I?
Yes, I would love anyone to, because I think I'm wearing my little tree thing here because the tree of life, and I think we're all connected, and Hawke's Bay's got to be connected. Yes. We're going to be together, we've got to be connected, and I think Tu Tera Mai signifies that we all stand together and we be together. Now, if I don't know all the words, I'm nervous, that's why I'm... Okay? Tu tera mai na iwi, owe, tato tato we. Tu tera mai na iwi, tato tato we. Whai a te maramatanga, me te aroha, e iwi, ki apatapatahi, ki apatahira. Tato, tato, way. Tato, tato, way.
Kia way.
Kia ora. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Glenys. Are you able to wait for a question?
Oh,
or
yes,
two?
I'd love to have a question.
Look, I hear your point, and I've seen a lot of submissions from Te Awanga and Homoana as well. We have in front of us a proposal for Clive that would involve a bus every 60 minutes from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. That would run between Hastings through Clive, Whakatū and into Napier. Is that kind of in line with what you're wanting to see, or is that not?
Well, I think it's a start. It's much better than just one bus morning and night.
Okay.
Anything's better, and I think you've got to actually make it user-friendly, make it
Yep.
so that families can get on it, and, you know, there should be a family pass maybe.
Uh-huh. Great.
And I know I went out to the Clive Market about a month ago, and I was talking to people. There was a lovely lady there I was talking to, and her son, she has got a 12-year-old handicapped son, and she spends a lot of time with him, and it means her older son, who's 15, misses out on being able to do things because he's got no way of getting into town because mum's got the other son. And I was just thinking what a great opportunity the bus would be for him to learn independence and resilience and being able to get himself places. You know, and I think it's safe on the buses. Kids have cell phones now. If my son lives in Korea and he has not learnt to, he's 32 now, and he still hasn't learnt to drive because he could use the buses and trains over there. And that's the culture. That's what they use. So, yeah.
Quite understand. Thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you, Martin.
All right. Our next submitter is Mr. or Councillor Simon Nixon. He has asked for a whiteboard, yes.
Yes, not councillor today, just Simon Nixon.
Just Simon Nixon.
Do you mind if I stand as well? Because I do want to use the
It
whiteboard.
should be on page, it is submitted number 221. So it's right near the end, but what page exactly it's on?
That would be great. Okay, I've made submissions on this issue several times in the past, most recently 2016, 2019.
Page
And
100.
you're right?
Sorry, page 100, Councillor.
And I've asked for, on those occasions, such things as services to Hawke's Bay Airport, inclusion of the sports park, increased frequency and more direct services. And blow me down, it's in your plan. So I have to say that is a very good move, and I do applaud the changes that you are proposing. I am concerned, I read the cost as an extra $8 million, and we already have significant financial support for bus services. The question is, how do we get more people on the buses? Because I come from Wellington originally. I know what a good public transport system is, and I know what it's like when most people travel by bus, and they certainly don't here. In fact, I saw the figures, 0.05% of people in Hawke's Bay to work travel by bus, which means 99.5% don't. So there's a lot of room for improvement. If we just doubled it to 1%, that would probably add something like 300,000 passengers a year. I do question some of the moves to go to 10-minute bus services. It actually needs, I think 20 minutes would be adequate as a first step to make sure it does have the effect we want. Now, what I wanted to talk about, and the reason I asked for the whiteboard is I trained as an economist, and for many years I worked for National Airways Corporation. And my job was determining forecasts for passenger demand with the airline. And one of the things I claim to have done is bought a direct service from Napier to Christchurch in my day, because it didn't exist then. So what I want to do is just talk about where demand comes from. It's all very theoretical, and it may or may not be relevant, but I think it is relevant. The one thing you need is you've got to have enough people to make it work. And how does it work? Well, most people don't realise this. If you have two communities, there's one link between them, one need for communication. If you double the size of the two communities, suddenly you actually have 4 times the amount of communication going on. This can be appointments, it could be just visitors, whatever, going to work. And so it goes on. So the bigger the community, try and get this right, the bigger the community, the more, it's an acceleration. It's actually, so A times B, passenger demand, where A is the population of one centre, B is the population of another. And if you double that, all it does is double demand. But if you double both, and that's more the case with Hastings and Napier, then you actually get 4 times the demand. And my belief is you need to concentrate more on core services, what I call hubs, because that's where the demand's going to come from. That's where it is now. And look at the bus stops. They're mostly going from Napier to Hastings. In fact, I think I saw 50% of your passengers travel on Napier to Hastings service. And I think that's where a lot of the effort goes. And the lady just spoke about Clive. I do agree that I think a service through Clive would attract some passengers, but it needs to be driven by demand out of Auckland, out of Napier and Hastings. The fares are dirt cheap. Really, your buses are so damn cheap, you're giving it away. I think the time considerations, I looked up the time to see if I could catch a bus over here. I reckon it would have taken me about an hour and a half to get here from Havelock North. That is not attractive. So I came here by bus, went home by bus at the moment. I'd spend 3 hours, a whole day, plus the time here. I mean, people are just not going to do that. So your direct service through Clive, I actually think an hour service is not probably enough. I think it probably needs to be more like 20 minutes. I think 20 minutes is a really good service, because if you miss it, on average, you're only going to wait 10 minutes. And that's, I think, an acceptable amount of time for people to wait. And the quality of the service, the buses are great, the drivers are great. They're very clean. You can't fault the buses. So I just thought you might be interested in this little mathematical explanation of what goes on, what drives the transport. And this is what I got when I worked at the airline. I did a lot of modelling. I know aviation's quite different, but it's also the same, because it's just about people getting around. And I think you'll find the same thing with phone services, internet, mail, and just about everything else. I think, Martin, that sort of pretty much wraps up. It was, I just wanted to add that little bit. I made some notes, mostly, I guess, about the cost, but the more I read your proposals, the more I thought, yes, they are definitely moving in the right direction. So I do applaud the changes that you're proposing. And in answer to the question, do I give way to buses when I'm driving down the road? Yes, I do. When the bus indicates, I flash my lights to tell them to go. And most of them are watching, and they'll go straight away. It doesn't delay me at all. Does that help the question?
Thank you, Simon. I just wanted to make a point with a question, but the point that I think everyone needs to understand in terms of the overall cost of the service, our long-term plan as a regional council projects up to a $10 million budget in 2030, and the additional cost of what we're proposing here wouldn't be an extra 8 million, would be an extra 2 million by then, of which Waka Kotahi would contribute its share. So we had actually had, I guess, an element of foresight in realising that we did need to up the game here, but I completely take on your point about ensuring that we get value for money for the spend. I got an impression from your submission that perhaps you thought public transport was a lost cause in Hawke's Bay? Is that...
No, I don't actually. I'm a big supporter of public transport. That's why I said I came from Wellington.
Yeah.
I have plenty of experience in places like London where trains come regularly, and most people, my son's lived there, he's now come back, but he's lived there for over 20 years. He got rid of his car, it was such a nuisance. And so if you've got a good transport system, but you've got to have enough people to support it, which is why I put my little exercise up there. We don't have a lot of people here compared to big cities, so we've got to somehow provide the best service and get the best result that we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from other members of the committee of Mr. Nixon? No, well,
Was I that bad or that good?
No, that was very
Simon.
clear, and thank you for the messages around frequency and focusing on the main routes. We understand that.
Thank you.
All right. Our next submitter is Mr. Alan Spinks. Good morning, Alan. Please do come and join us at the table. Thank you, Simon.
Well, first of all, I'll give you a copy of my paper
All right, if you want to.
and a proposal for a solar-powered train service,
Yes.
for which I've already submitted to the council, but there's a copy of that. And
Right.
what
Yeah,
I'm going
we've
to
got
present,
that in our, I'll get those passed around.
but I may not read what I've given you, but that's really what I'm talking about.
That's all right. You've got 10 minutes, as you know. You heard the way it works when I spoke earlier, Alan.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
Right, well, I graduated in engineering at Liverpool University, the city I was born in England. And my first job out of university was to design a train tracking system where the electric trains could communicate with each other and their signal boxes via the overhead wires. And I designed that using the newfangled device which has only just come on the market, transistors. And so I became an expert in designing transistor circuits for all sorts of things, including, you know, the B-scan systems in hospitals for pregnant mums. I designed a very fine ultrasonic system using transistors again for it would test pregnant mice. But it never got used for that. But it could find fatigue cracks in Auckland Harbour Bridge down to 0.1 of a millimetre size. Because a fatigue crack starting at 0.1 of a millimetre grows very quickly over 2 months to 6 millimetres and causes consternation. So I gave papers on that at an engineering conference in Earl's Court, and I was invited to New Zealand by the science community in New Zealand House to bring some of my innovations to New Zealand. So I came in 1974 in the end, and I worked in Ministry of Works Central Laboratories, but then I started my own solar-powered company and sold solar panels to farms and other places, alternative energy, and that paper on a proposed solar-powered train is a result of that. But now I'm retired and living in Hastings near a daughter. But I will say I used a bus to get here and took 43 minutes and it cost $1.50. That's cheaper than the cost of parking a car for this duration. So we do need to use the buses, and there was only 4 people on it, including me. But I have been before, and we've had a maximum of 8 people on a bus between Hastings and Napier. But at $1.50 each, no, it hardly pays for the bus at all. And but we can't get people to use buses. People won't use buses. Anyway, I found that trains were very popular. Once the bus population in the number of buses in Liverpool increased to 2,000 buses, was actually the total bus fleet in Liverpool serving 1 million people. There was no room for them in the city centre. They couldn't get through, and then more and more people in the 50s bought cars. So there was no room for the buses to move, and I used to take a tram car to the university, and it took 20 minutes to travel 8 kilometres from my father's house to the university. When the trams were given up and replaced with buses, the bus took 40 minutes. And in rush hour, I couldn't get on a bus at the university because they were full. The buses only seated 56 people at that time. The trams seated 100 people, but they were all given up because of the nationalisation of the electricity industry. That's another political problem, but anyway, that's what happened. So I had to take a bus into town from the university, only about a mile. That took about 15 minutes. Then 15 to 20 minutes getting out of the city again, and then 40 minutes home. So it took over an hour. But if I walked an extra 5 minutes to the railway station, I could get a train And that train, a steam train at that time, was 12 minutes to my hometown, 8 kilometres. When it was electrified, it was 9 minutes. So 9 minutes to do 8 kilometres by electric train. The result was that the people forsook the buses in droves. And around in the 2000s, the buses were just, some of them were only quite small, like the shuttle buses we've got in this country. Some of the places were served by buses like that because they only took about 3 or 4 people at a time, whereas the trains were packed, even at all times of the day. So I haven't really got onto what I've written about, but once people started buying cars in England, everybody bought cars, and people forsook public transport in droves, except the railways started picking up again in the 1970s, and now the number of passengers taken by train all over England is about twice the peak of what they reached before the war in the 1930s, the number of people. Liverpool has built a city rail loop underground, designed for 100,000 people a day, and it's within months it was taking 175,000 people a day. People were using the trains, and they're building more tunnels now to serve more places. It's all sandstone, so it's quite an easy rock to build underground railways. Anyway, back to buses for public transport in Hawke's Bay. Nobody will use them. That's really one of the problems. But I think the problem is they're not frequent enough. There are no bus stops are not close to people's houses. It takes me 8 minutes to walk to my nearest bus stop in Finley, in Hastings, which I did today. And people won't walk 8 minutes to catch a bus. They'll walk 4 minutes. And so the bus stops should be within 4 minutes walk of everybody. We need more bus stops. Because people, but they will walk 10 minutes easily or 15 minutes to a railway station. Or you could cycle to a railway station if it's a 20-minute walk and park your bike on the railway platform. You can't park your bike at a bus stop. Even if you put racks there with padlocks, it wouldn't work. It just, it wouldn't be suitable. But you can put cycle racks on a railway station. And Clive, for example, they could have a railway station across the river, but have an electric bus going round a loop from the station, round the loop and back, and park there, wait for the train. When it's got the passengers, go round that loop again. So have a bus loop service serving Clive to meet up with a passenger train at a new station built there for them. But an easy way to run buses in Hastings in particular is to have a bus loop around the city centre, and all the buses from every direction enter that loop, go round the loop and out again on the road that they came in on. And so if a bus comes this direction, it goes round the loop and out. And don't let it wait there, let the waiting time be at the other end. And that's what's been done in my city where I was born in Liverpool. The bus comes in, round a loop, and it's a smallish loop, so that no one takes more than 5 minutes to cross it by walking. So it can be quite a long loop, but the walking distance from there to there is less than 5 minutes. So the bus goes round that loop and out. And so shoppers can get off the bus anywhere in that loop, do their shopping, they end up in this direction, find a bus stop, wait for their bus to come round, and it goes. So that's the best way to increase the number of buses, passengers on buses. And it has worked because the people are returning to the buses in the city of Liverpool in particular, because the buses are reliable. I've tried to use...
go, by the way.
Am I running out of time?
Yeah, 1 minute to go. If you just want
1 minute to go.
wrap
All
up
right,
your main point.
let's go back to trains. So we built bus loops to serve the
Yep.
populations,
Got bus loops, yeah.
but if we had a train service between Hastings and Napier, it needs to serve the airport. Because number one, airline passengers will not use buses. I used the bus to Heathrow Airport from the railway station a long time ago, and in many times I was the only passenger on the bus. But now they've built the Crossrail rail service from Heathrow to Hayes and Harlington, which joins on the new Crossrail layout. It's carrying 45,000 passengers a day, because airline passengers will use trains, but they won't use buses. So we need to have a rail service to Napier Airport, which meets up with every plane, and the passengers and railway stations serving all the areas on that line, like Clive, maybe one right in the city centre near the council offices in Hastings itself, and another station near the golf course outside Napier, and then you're going on to the airport. And people will use, because you can get a taxi to the nearest railway station if it's too far to walk, and get a train to the airport. And you can even have gin and tonics and things served on the train in a restaurant car.
Thank you, Alan. That sounds frightfully civilised. And look, you've lodged a very comprehensive submission, and I remember meeting you in Mayor Hazelhurst's office a year or two ago to talk about electric trains. And don't worry, it's not a message lost. Thank you for bringing both trains and the idea of bus loops to our attention. There's a lot to think about. As
Right, so there's more details in the paper I've given you.
Yes, and we'll make sure that we read that as part of our deliberation.
And then the next thing is, of course, the solar powered system. I designed solar power things. Solar panels are the cheapest electricity generating system in the world today.
Yeah.
Costs about $600 a kilowatt.
All right.
So there's a solution for you.
Thank you very much indeed for bringing that again to our attention. So better leave it there. And our next submitter is Paula Fern.
I've got some reading material for you all. I spoke to Jeremy Rose, who wrote this article a couple of weeks ago in Carbon News, and he's very kindly given me permission to share it with you. So I'll just come and bring it round. There's also a similar article in Stuff within the last couple of weeks. Hi, Alex.
Thanks, Paula. Hello, thank you.
Oh, no, I want to go to tell you what, if I give you those,
Yeah, I'll pass them on.
it'd be fantastic, thank you. I'll give you those ones as well. Thank you. Well, I submitted last year in April. And at the time, talked to you about transition engineering and gave you all the links. And I remember Tanya seemed very interested in that. Did any of you follow up on that at all and contact Susan Crumdyke?
Some reading. I did some reading.
Did you contact her at all
Not
about it?
directly.
Okay, because I think that's an opportunity sort of lost. I also really stressed the unused railway lines, so it was interesting to hear the previous submission. And I see that your plan for Central Hawke's Bay, which I'm quite passionate about too, as other people here are, a bus trial in a couple of years of 5 days a week, twice a day, doesn't really cut the mustard for us. All it does, you're transferring workers, but you're actually not giving anything back to the ratepayers in Central Hawke's Bay. And I think we need to connect more. And buses don't do it. We want to get people off the roads. If you travel regularly, like I do, I travel 11 hours every fortnight. I spend in that car driving, and I'm spending over $100 a week in petrol. The roads are shocking. There are potholes everywhere. There are logging trucks that we have to contend with, any number of dangers, and I feel that we miss out all the time. Please look and read this article, contact the gentleman that's in there, because he's talking to regional councils across the country about implementing his plan, which is electric rail cars. And they're quick, he wants to focus on keeping it within New Zealand. They're manufactured here, they're serviced here, there's industries attached to them. So it helps with our tourism. I would love to know what the latest figures are for people that live in Central Hawke's Bay, because we have had a real explosion of people moving there. What are the figures of people that actually aren't working in Central Hawke's Bay that are commuting every day up to Hastings and Havelock and Napier for work? Have you investigated any feasibility studies at all, Martin? On
Feasibility studies for.
the trains?
Yes.
So can we see that? Can you release it publicly?
Well, how about you finish your presentation? I'll come back to you on that.
No, I'd actually really like to get some feedback from you all.
Okay, well, look, it's not the way the process works that you ask us questions, but I'm, as chair, going to indulge you on that, Paula,
Thank you.
because you have put this to us. But we have been through quite a long process in the generation of this regional public transport plan. And we have engaged a firm of experts to advise us on the best way to achieve a step change in mode shift to get people out of cars for the very reasons you suggest, along with climate change. The advice that we have received is that within a $10 to $12 million budget, which I talked about before, we simply cannot even scratch the surface with a train service. We would need central government support.
Exactly.
So
Great,
that's where I
because
think the conversation is going.
They want to do that.
Yeah, so I think that's where the conversation is going, is how do we, through this public transport plan, broker central government support for the scale of capital and operational investment required. In the meantime, the advice we received is that you would get much more bang for your buck, to put it colloquially, by a more frequent bus service. And so operating within the ratepayer capacity that we have within our current funding models, Central Hawke's Bay, we're not waiting until 2025. We're going to start a trial pretty much pronto. And my view is that if for the price of one train you can do 20 buses, that is, I don't know, 300 cars that aren't on the road in the morning. So it's a start, but it's not to the exclusion of trains. That is, I think, something that we as regional New Zealand need to really progress with central government. And you will see that reflected in the content of this plan, that we intend to do exactly that. But buses are something we can and do have a lever for now, which is why it's in the plan on the basis of the expert advice that we have received. Our mind is open at this stage. We are hearing from submitters, but that is the journey we have been on. And the information that I have sought in testing that advice from MR Cagney and from the staff is that you are talking $100 million at least to get an effective and comparable train service from Central Hawke's Bay to here, and that's an immense challenge.
I hope that you actually take that article in.
Yes.
And that you contact the person that's involved with it, because I think that the consultants that you're speaking to, perhaps they haven't talked to him or know exactly what they're doing.
Exactly, and that's why this is a public process and the value you can bring to it.
But I think that it's all too slow, and we need to get vehicles off the roads.
Yep.
But a bus is still a vehicle on the road. Does anyone have any questions? Because as you can see, I have no notes.
Yeah, well, look, the question I have that I asked Tiara is, leaving aside the amenities which a train can provide in the sense of the experience, in practical terms, if you could get 2,000 people to Hastings in a day and back from Waipukurau at a tenth the cost on a bus, why wouldn't you do that?
It's actually not just Waipukurau.
Well, just as a general idea.
I was talking to someone who lives in Pokawa yesterday, who you probably know too, and she thought train would be fantastic because it goes straight through the middle of Pokawa. You've got lots of stops on the way. If you aren't thinking of just transporting workers and actually having it throughout the day, obviously not as frequently as a bus, but moving at certain times, you increase the people coming to and from Central Hawke's Bay, because we actually do have some quite attractive things to come and see and do down there. And if they can bring their bikes, all good, well and good, to come and try the trails out. But for people like myself and like the person I was talking to yesterday, it means that we can actually spend our time after work in Hastings, and we can go to our favourite restaurants, and then we can catch a train home safely.
Mayor Walker, have you got any questions?
Paula, I think that the aspirations around rail, our community is really clearly articulating. And I suppose and the challenge to us is about how we articulate that aspiration alongside what are the practical changes we can make too. Do you think that having a step with buses is helpful, or do you think that actually if we're going to make a change, you've got to go to rail and just forget the buses?
I think that you have to actually make the commitment to go for rail, because otherwise it'll stop, we'll never ever get there. And I think that the last time I spoke to you, I actually asked you guys to be aspirational, not just tick boxes, but actually make an infrastructure that we're all proud of, that works, and it's a model for other regions to actually work from. And I don't see that in your plan.
Right. Any other questions from committee members? I can assure you that we will inquire through the staff into this as part of assessment of the options.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paula.
Thanks, Paula.
All right, we are scheduled now to have a break.
Afternoon, the morning tea is actually 11.
All right, so should we carry on?
So the people here might be wise too.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Well, they'll be, the next ones are on Zoom.
Oh, are they? Okay. All right, well, the schedule I have here says that we are taking a break now, but if the submitters have got other information, I think we better run for that. So is Russell Turnbull here?
Via Teams.
Via Teams, are you there, Russell?
No, he's not here yet.
Okay, how about Mark Reid?
No.
Are there any submitters here who are intending to speak this morning who would like to speak now, or should we in fact have our break? Yes, sir, what's your name?
Duncan Darrell from Bike Hawke's Bay.
Bike Hawke's Bay, yes, I think I remember you. Okay, Duncan. Well, should we hear from Duncan while he's here?
Yes. I can get back to my toddler then, so.
No, well, that's equally important, if not more so.
Just where have you left them?
Yeah, places. Kia ora koutou, esteemed councillors, thank you so much. Hopefully we won't take too much time. My name's Duncan Darroch, I'm a Clive resident, father to a 2-year-old, full-time stay-at-home dad, which gives me a lot of time to use the infrastructure around the Hawke's Bay, especially for the young family now, and just to get the feel for the space. So I've read the plan, and I actually submitted with only 4 minutes to go because I put the toddler to sleep and didn't quite write as much as I wanted to. So I'll speak to what I wanted to talk about this morning. I come on behalf of Bike Hawke's Bay, which is a bicycle advocacy group. We meet once a month at the Clive Hotel, and as well as that, I've been connected to the retiree bike community, consulting them, talking with their members around how they use the trail network, done some qualitative analysis and some qualitative surveys of their members and their experiences in this last little while. So I fully support the plan for the regional public transport, particularly as it shifts from a coverage to a patronage service. I see that as only a win, increasing the frequency, getting more reliable service. I live in Clive, and as other submitters will point out, there's only one bus per day, so it's not an effective service at all. It's a commuting service, and it just doesn't work. So I do support your 1 hour proposal for 1 hour per during the day. It would work. I would take my son on the bus, and we could get around. In saying that, I do have another option for mostly fine weather, and that is to use a cargo bike. So he's sitting on behind me. He's taking the world in. He's using the beautiful trail network that you've got. So I'd like to speak about making sure that we continue to focus on interconnected networks. So we're not simply building a bus network, we're building a framework of transport. And I'm sure as the Transport Committee, this is your focus as well. But just to see it as a bus plan really cuts the nose off at the front. So that interconnected network means we need to plan for multimodal journeys. That's a big buzzword, but what does that mean? It means that even though the bus stop is now further away, because you've shifted the model of the service, you build the infrastructure at the bus stop, not necessarily every single one, but maybe community hubs to enable people to get to the stop in a different manner than just walking there. So that multimodal journey may include cycling, it may include electric scooters, personal, or potentially, if you build the right infrastructure, private. The Lime scooter, it does, and other brands do come to areas where the infrastructure is correct and the population is there. But building the infrastructure, and it's not too hard to find examples of it around New Zealand and around the world, where they can create the right space for people to intuitively and simply come in one way, transition, get on your bus, go on the rest of the way, knowing that whatever way you got there will still be there when you get back. That's another key point. So there is some work you could do, council could do in that space. I know in Clive you could definitely build a hub for transport that would potentially service the wider Cape Coast community. There's a lot of empty shops frontage there. You could trial it, hire one of the empty buildings, create the internal secured infrastructure, potentially swipe card access or some sort of CCTV system, any manner of ways to facilitate people be able to make that transport choice. Now in Auckland, when they have done these park and ride hubs, they can get filled up with cars, and so it really is making sure your focus is on emissions reduction. Although a reduction from someone driving all the way to Napier, only driving to Clive could be a thing as well. So secured bike storages, Lockheed Dockies, as they have in Napier, in Christchurch and other places where you can, without any lock your bike up, plug it in if it's an electric bike. Bike cages, such as in the Napier CBD beside the gym down the road, those kind of infrastructure solutions are there. Improved and consistent bike carrying capacity on buses. Now this is something that a friend of mine has encountered where he's got to the bus stop and found that the 2 bike spots are full. Yeah. He's had to bike home, get a car, drive to work. So he's talked to the bus driver, and it's at driver discretion whether they allow that bike onto the bus. So creating some consistency there, developing the capacity on those buses to have more than 2, or if you're only going to stick at 2, develop a technology solution so that people can know for sure there's a spot there. Okay, if you're trying to create some real-time apps which will tell you the frequency of buses or their arrival, add into that some sensors into your bike racks or something like that. So you can say, hey, look, I can take my bike. There's a bus coming. It's 5 minutes away. It's got a bike spot. Let's do that. Yeah. Those kind of solutions. So as well as that multimodal journey is going to require investment, which isn't in the scope of the bus plan, but in the broader plan in improving trail infrastructure. Now this is a hot topic for me, as I cannot use the majority of the trail infrastructure due to the nature of my bike. My bike doesn't fit through gates, it doesn't fit through blue pinch bars, and as a result, me and my 2-year-old use a 100k stretch of road to get to Hamawana Play Centre and back twice a week. I've talked to council officers and continually bump heads with them for the very reason they'd like to exclude motorbikes from the trail network. Now I've got evidence as early as 7:30 this morning when I was out running at the Ngātaroto Bridge by the rail crossing that the infrastructure the council builds to exclude motorbikes gets damaged. It gets cut, it gets bowled over. So if I was as motivated as a motorbike rider, I'd bring my grinder too. But I'm not going to. But motorbikes will not respect physical infrastructure. They'll get past it. So we need to create a shift to say harm minimisation. Can we open the network up and figure out a way that we can create a climate resilient, empowered community, particularly in the Cape Coast, to enable transport choices, which doesn't come at the expense of real functionality and doesn't create undue risk, though the risk is slightly overstated. There is a case in Palmerston North a few years ago where a young person was killed on a bike by a motorbike rider, and the mayor at the time is on record saying he would not make any changes to restrict access because he saw the value of the trail infrastructure being inclusive to the community. And just like we don't restrict access to our roads when there's a drunk driver, we shouldn't restrict access to our trails when there's a person doing something wrong. We use other methods, community-empowered, engaged communities to respond and react to issues. We could give them an app, we could give them a phone number, we could create kaitiaki or create the relationships in community, so if something does something wrong, they can get onto it, okay? So that does link into the Cape community. There needs to be urgent work there to improve transport options. That may be, as other submitters may talk to, a loop bus service out to the Cape communities. In concert with that, I would recommend strongly that the council consider a trial of removing 2 or 3 gates to see what happens. If the budget allows, work towards improving the trail surface. I ran through puddles of mud this morning, which is not what I'd like to get on the back of my toddler. You know, it's not showing manaki to our tourists. The trail surface is not a climate resilient surface and is not at a transport grade. It's recreational, yeah, but you're not going to ride electric scooter across it. You're certainly not going to take a young kid across it if you know, unless they're pretty rugged and like eating mud like my boy does.
Duncan, you've got 1 minute left.
Okay, thank you. I'll stop there in case there's any questions, and I'm very happy to present further if there's more that you'd like to talk about at some point.
I just have one question. I love your passion. If we were to include a policy dealing with the nature of our bus stops in terms of their design and accessibility, that you know, we encourage or promote or develop bike storage, locky-dockies and those sorts of things, would that be in the right direction to at least part of what you're talking about?
Yep, definitely. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be every bus stop. Transport planners would look at where the majority of the population is coming to. So maybe 1 per community, develop something that's secured, undercover and reliable.
Thank you. Any other questions from other councillors? Councillor Kerr.
As I've listened to the presentations and read presentations, it appears that the cost of the bus fare is generally not the limiting factor. It's more likely to be the amount of time it's going to save me, or the amount of time, more time it's going to take for me to get from A to B. The frequency, how often it comes through my village, and how accessible it is, how far it is from my place to the connection, be it the bus stop, the train station. Of those, what do you see as the most critical factor? Where should I be putting my investment? Frequency, location, so accessibility, or making the service so quick it gets me there faster than my car?
I think it's on the frequency front. Just knowing that you don't have to wait or be there on the hour or on the half hour, that you can almost just leave from home and there'll be a bus. I think.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries.
Appreciate that.
Now, look, a gentleman has just stood up and asked if he could speak. That's not kind of how are you a submitter?
No.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, look, the submitter's time is up. Could you just perhaps make your point that you wish to raise, and we'll talk about how we deal with it?
About bus stops.
Yes.
They're poorly signposted.
Right.
A lot of bus stops I've seen are just a yellow smudge on the curb. There's no stand that says the bus stop, and there's no timetable on the bus stop.
Right.
So how do people know when the bus is coming and the frequency?
Thank you very much. So
I don't think regional council does that. I think it's the city council.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Your name was, sir?
Barry Davis.
Barry Davis. All right, I've taken a note of that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
All
Davis.
signposted.
Yeah, and we do have policies around bus stop design, and we've had lots of submissions about real-time information.
Thanks, Darren.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a cup of tea now, apparently. Thank you very much. Get back to your...
Head to Hawana.
Back to your charge.
Go pick up the boy.
Duncan.
Thank you.
All right, we'll have a I don't know, a 20-minute break now.
Harvey Burgess has been in the year.
It's time. we certainly welcome and encourage your continued interest, but we do have, as I mentioned at the outset, some COVID settings that we also, and safety settings that we need to be aware of, where if you're not a metre apart, we'd encourage you to wear a mask, and we're making some available now. As other submitters come in particular, that's going to be increasingly necessary. But if you are comfortable to go to wherever you live and watch online, that's equally an option as well. I'm not saying go, but there will be more submitters coming in, and it just does raise that issue that we need to manage. So if you are able to wear a mask as people get closer and closer together, that will be greatly appreciated, and we'll all keep safe. All right, now, our next submitter, welcome, Russell Turnbull. Can you hear me? I think, Russell, you can't hear? Doesn't sound like he's... his end. We can see here he's got his microphone on.
Ah, the room's on mute.
Can we unmute the room?
Go, Katie.
Ask him again.
Not a bad move,
Can you hear us, Russell?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you very much.
All right, Russell, well, thank you for joining us. I've explained to the submitters, and I'll repeat the message now for those that have arrived since, that the way this works, we've got a lot of submitters to get through, and we've got a fairly strict 10-minute requirement to speak to, which you can either fill with your information that you wish to share with us, or you may wish to stop at about 8 minutes to allow some time for questions. Bear in mind that this isn't an opportunity for debate or discussion. We are simply receiving information that we can consider alongside all of the written content and the submissions also received from people who aren't here today. And we will be doing that through the deliberations process next week. So with all of that said, Russell, what happens is when you start, our timer starts, and I'll let you know when we're at about 8 minutes. Welcome, thank you, the floor is yours.
Thank you to the Chair, Councillor Williams, and also thank you to members of the committees, the mayors, representatives of the other councils, and of course our representatives from Waka Kotahi. I'd like to share a slide pack if that's okay.
Sure.
And just kind of luck, this will work. Let me know if that's on your screen.
Can see that? Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you for this opportunity. And there are 4 areas which we want to cover, which is just going to provide some flavour to our written submission. And those 4 areas are around cash fares, reliability of the services, the span of the hours, and how the new routes in My Way might work together. So firstly, very quickly, a little bit about GoBus. We're, of course, your current provider in Napier and Hastings, and have been for a number of years now. But around the country of about 40 bus depots, from which 2,500 employees and 2,000 vehicles operate. And just for your interest, we currently operate 35 electric vehicles, which will be 51 by the end of December. And we have 3 main brands under GoBus in New Zealand. GoBus, of course, Johnson's, which is our coaching and tour brand, Skybus, which is in Auckland Airport doing airside transport, and our owners, Kinetic, have recently purchased NZ Bus, which themselves have 66 electric vehicles as well. So on to the 4 points. So we're very keen to get cash off buses, as cash is a health and safety issue, and is certainly the main reason that we often have robberies from our drivers. And of course, as a PCBU, we take that responsibility incredibly seriously. We are an ACC accredited employer. And so we've seen that since cash has been taken off the buses in Auckland well over 2 years ago, any kind of assaults and robberies have just reduced dramatically. And with the likes of your B card now available, there's no real reason that we can't get cash off buses in Hawke's Bay as well. And we'd really like that considered, as we'll provide a much better and safer workplace for our drivers, and of course for the travelling passengers as well. We note with interest the increased distance of some of the routes, for instance, the new Route 1, which will go through to Havelock North. And reliability is our single biggest issue. If we don't have reliable buses, we really have nothing. And so we're strongly advocating that that the regional council talks to Napier City Council and Hastings District Council and Waka Kotahi about bus lanes where car-based congestion is causing reliability issues for our buses. There's no point having a big long bus route, which is great in practice, but if it's getting held up in traffic in Napier, then the poor people in Hastings and Havelock North simply aren't getting the reliable bus service through no fault of their own. So that's the type of thing that we're looking for. Bus priority measures include bus lanes, which are singly the most effective forms of bus priority, but also signal jumps at traffic lights. And our drivers would really like to make the point also that passenger anxiety can be eased if they know when the bus is due to arrive. So we're really advocating real-time bus stops at the key bus stops throughout the network. The span of hours is a major concern for our drivers. Currently, we're coming off the road between 6 and 7 p.m. and the plan promotes that the service is going to go to 9 p.m. And they can see that the patronage really drops off after 5 p.m. And I guess, they're sort of concerned about, how few people might be catching a bus after 7 p.m, but also, what that might mean for their safety as it becomes dark for many of the hours they operate. The routes in My Way. So My Way has been a really fantastic success, and we're so proud to be part of providing that in Hastings. And we can see how well it's going, and it really needs to be given a good amount of time before we start talking about new routes going in. So there's a couple of new routes planned for Hastings, but I think they should be just held back from any further work until My Way is fully tested in that area. Also, we note Route 6, the proposed new route through Ahuriri and out to the airport, which is going to, in the way it's presented at the moment, miss quite a few people who are living in that area and make it more difficult for people in West Shore to catch a bus as well. So we're kind of very concerned about that. And our drivers are very supportive of the Central Hawke's Bay service. They can see that that would work really well. But our experience is that interpeak travel could be just as popular. So the idea at the moment is to provide it at peak time only for workers. But I think interpeak travel for people who are coming to shops or visit people in hospital from Central Hawke's Bay will be very popular. So in summary, we really want to make our buses as safe a workplace as possible. And it's already been proven in Auckland that we can take that risk away by taking the cash off the bus. Bus priorities are really essential if you are going to get the best value out of your investment in additional services and route improvements. We just ask that we tread very carefully with later services. We're not against later services, we understand them, but just be really careful. And My Way looks to be successful, so let's give it a really good chance to work before we start changing any of the services.
Hey, well, thank you, Russell. Yes, I don't know if you can hear me, but
yes.
I think as the current service provider, hearing your insights is incredibly valuable and important. I just have to, I guess, put this to you in fairness, Russell. When I read the issue of reliability, the question that I wrote in my notes was how many bus services have been cancelled in the last 12 months? I don't know how many submissions that I've read raise the issue of reliability and people saying they've basically given up. They can't go standing in the rain for buses that don't arrive. They've got too many commitments and some real frustration. What message can you share in your position with GoBus in terms of the steps being taken to ensure road priority and bus lanes aside, that reliability is a priority for you to keep the service something that people can rely on?
Sure. So obviously bus driver shortages are the main issue around bus reliability. Without the driver being behind the wheel, we really can't make the service go anywhere. And this is a nationwide problem with, services of 13% of services, for instance, being cancelled in some of our major centres at the moment, just through bus driver shortages. So it's something that Hawke's Bay isn't immune from. All across the country, this is a major trouble. Yeah. So we've spent well on $1 million over the last year on recruitment. That's recruitment advertising alone. So we've thrown a lot of money at it. But what the real answer is making bus driving more attractive. So that starts with, for instance, making it a safer place, but also improving the remuneration. And members might be aware that Auckland Transport recently increased their funding to bus companies to get the rate up to $27 an hour, and GoBus has just added a further $1 on top of that to make it $28 an hour. So we're working with all councils in Waka Kotahi with regards to getting funding improved for bus drivers. And to be honest, if we can get bus driver pay up, that will bring people back onto driving buses and make it more competitive and more attractive employment option.
Well, thank you, Russell. I really did have to clear that elephant out of the room, and I'm grateful for the answer and response you've given. That is reassuring. So any other questions from members of the committee? I'm not sure how we're doing for time.
Yep, 9 minutes, not 10 minutes now.
Linda.
Kia ora, Russell. Linda Stewart, Waka Kotahi. I'm interested, do you have any figures at hand as to what percentage of users currently do use cash on your services?
I can't answer that directly for Hawke's Bay. Katie might have a better idea of that, but typically I think the B card is now sitting at about 90% of all transactions across the country, but Katie might have a better answer on that one than me.
Thank you.
Similar in Hawke's Bay.
All right, I think I did read one submission saying that the B card system was actually clunky, problematic. The B card, is easily broken and destroyed. So it's not a universally held view that it's the perfect system. But we certainly hear your message, Russell, from a driver safety perspective.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for sharing your time with us and for your support for public transport in our region and making My Way work in particular.
Okay, thank you very much all.
Thank you, Council.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, our next submitter is Mark Reid from Horizons.
He's online.
Who's appearing by Teams. Good morning, Mark.
Kia ora koutou, can you hear me okay?
Yeah. You know how this works? You've got 10 minutes?
Yes, I heard just before, thank you.
All right. Well, I won't take any more of your time. Away you go. Floor's yours. Screen's yours.
So yeah, thank you members and committee for hearing us from Horizons today. Councillor Sam Ferguson, who is our Passenger Transport Committee Chair, was going to join us. Unfortunately, he hasn't been able to, so I'll take you through a few points and hopefully won't take up too much of your time. I'll speak to our experience going through our regional public transport plan recently. So we were fortunate just to adopt ours through council about 2 weeks ago and have gone through the same hearings and deliberations process you're going through right now, just back in June. So I think our regions probably share a lot of similarities. I'm sure things I speak to will probably resonate with the same sorts of feedback you've got. We certainly got a really strong rural focus through our submissions. We heard a lot from people outside of our main urban areas where we currently provide comparatively quite a lot of service compared to limited to no service on many of our rural areas. And we heard a lot from those communities. We heard a lot about connecting communities, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in a little bit around our regional and interregional service investigation we're looking to do. And we also heard a lot from passenger rail, and I'm sure that's probably not a subject as well that is foreign through this process you're going through now. I'll talk to our I guess what we're looking at as a region-wide investigation, and that is outlined in our submission. But really just to highlight, this was a key thing that came through our members, through our committee, and also through feedback we got through our hearings, was around looking at how we provide services across our region. Not just say looking at Wanganui to Palmerston North or Levin to Palmerston North, or even within our region, but actually looking beyond that. So looking into the Grey Wellington region, looking into the Hawke's Bay region, to Waikato, Taranaki. I guess we are positioned in the Lower North Island to, really be able to make those connections. And it's for us really about having an RPTP that supports those journeys that people make, not looking at a regional boundary and saying that's where our service runs to, because our communities, our public don't look at those boundaries. They drive across roads without thinking that I've gone from Hawke's Bay Regional Council to Horizons. There is no reason why we shouldn't be thinking of the same things when it comes to public transport. So we would really support working with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council team as we go through our region-wide investigation. We would really support being able to look at how we can make those connections and even signal that future investment. So even if it's we don't know where we're going to be right now in the next year, 2, 3 years, but actually into the future, how do we want to connect Dannyburg through to Central Hawke's Bay and then through to Napier Hastings, or vice versa down to Palmerston North or down to Wairarapa. I guess now is the opportunity to be having those conversations about how we can look at that in the future. And that was really strongly supported through the feedback we got through our hearings. The next thing I'll talk about is passenger rail. So again, in our submission, we included a policy/action that we included through our regional public transport plan, and we didn't have one in there going into our hearings and deliberations, but did include those words. And really, it's about supporting the opportunity for passenger rail in the future, and we would really support the committee to be able to reflect something similar. It's not saying that we know what that's going to look like now or even in the future, but actually let's not be an impediment to perhaps having the future, passenger rail being an option in the future. So let's make sure we support those options through the policies and strategy we put in place now. And the last thing I'll talk to is probably just, Horizons are really keen to be able to strengthen our relationship with Hawke's Bay Regional Council, to be able to work with Katie and the team. I know that my general manager and I are planning a trip up your way in October to be able to look at what you're doing with My Way. We are really interested in being able to share lessons. We're not so different in size and types of services we deliver. So I think there's a great opportunity there to be able to learn from each other. We both have recently gone through this process, to be able to, I guess, reset where we're going and be able to move forward. So I'll leave it at that, but happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much indeed. And the first question, Mark, is from Mayor Walker, Central Hawke's Bay.
Kia ora, Mark. Kia ora to our neighbours, actually in the Horizons region, but bounding to Central Hawke's Bay. So thank you for your submission. I actually have 2 questions. The first one is, in your submission process, did you get any quantitative data about people movements in that northern part of Horizons in the Tararua district that could be relevant to those that might want to travel through Central Hawke's Bay as well? And my second question is about, thank you for the policy suggestion about the interregional rail. Did you also adopt an action into your plan regarding that interregional rail work?
So thanks for the question. To the first one, no, we didn't receive any quantitative data, in particular around Tararua. I guess we received a large amount of feedback, and it's probably quite sporadic in terms of where it came from our rural communities. It was hard to say it was necessary if you want to make a trip from one location to another, but more just a large number of locations to other locations around the region, which really, I guess, supported us going, well, let's look at this more holistically. To your second question around the policy we had in place, so that what we've got listed there actually went in as an, I have to remember this now, an action in our RPTP, and so there was an overarching policy which isn't listed in our submission, but it was around regional and interregional travel. So the specific wording there was an action against a slightly higher level policy around interregional and regional travel.
Thank you. I just wanted to assure you, we recently met with the team from Horizons around better, I guess, connections between the regions and the freight and logistics hub that's been set up down there and the opportunities that presents. I just wanted to thank you for the policy suggestion, and I'm very much on the page that we should include in our plan a policy to advocate for central government support to complement the public transport offering we can afford with regional and interregional passenger services. But very much, with your view that you very much need central government support for that?
Yes, we certainly, we had a lot of feedback saying this is what we want to achieve. I guess we were looking to find a way to balance supporting that through our RPTP without saying we have all the answers, all the money to support that investment now. But actually, let's get it in there to make sure we're not ruling it out as and when those opportunities might arise.
So I would think about 50 of the 200 submissions we've received are asking us to do something precisely along those lines. So, any other questions? Have we got any time left?
Yeah, we've got 8 minutes gone.
We've still got a couple of minutes left if there are any questions.
A comment, if I may?
Councillor Kerr, yep.
I really like the concept that although we may not know where we're going this year or next year or how we're going to get there, that our vision for what we're going to achieve in the public transport space is united across boundaries. So I very much support that. Thank you.
No, good to hear.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mark, and for the time taken. It was really great to hear from another region, having had that recent experience with your own public transport plan. Much appreciated.
Massive opportunity to get there.
Thank you, everyone.
Centre of the world.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah.
Right.
Takapo will be the next Otani.
Our next submitter, according to my schedule, is Grace Fulford.
Yeah, sorry, if you want to go in front. Yeah.
Were you here when I explained how it works earlier? If not, please come and have a seat.
These people got daytime jobs, you know? They can't be here all day.
It was only 20 minutes ago. But basically, you've got 10 minutes. Use it how you see fit. If you want to save some time for questions, stop about 8, we'll let you know when you're getting there. Thank you. Floor's yours. Away you go. Good to have you here.
You're all chairman, councillors and committee members. Our submission is on behalf, I'm Heather, this is Grace, on behalf of TNG in the Whakatū area. So about our area is Whakatū is a significant shift-based employee, us being TNG. And it's primarily an industrial-based area, pack houses, meatworks, etc. We have a large need for people, both morning and evening shifts during the season, which can extend from February to October, depending on the seasonal demands and impacts. Just one of our pack houses requires approximately 90 people per shift to make it efficient and effective. While the business and investing in automation, this will only be ever supplementary to people, not a replacement of. And we have a large number of people who would like to work but have absolutely no practical means to get to work. We also have a significant number of people who look to carpool. We also have instances of, e.g., one person brings 4 people to work. If that one person is sick, that will result in 5 people being able to work. This is a significant loss of income potential for themselves, from a social impact, and also it affects our production of work. We would like to investigate the feasibility of an industrial express type service that would correlate with shift times to get people to work on time every day. Similar to what we have at the present time with the school shifts, the school runs, we perhaps could do something like that from our shift is 6 to 2:30. We have another shift that's 3 to 11:30. I know there's Freshco, another pack house. They run the same shift hours as what we do. So, yeah, we see that's their potential.
So I'll just talk a bit more about our proposal. We feel like a service like this could provide access to work for a group of people that may not have access like otherwise. As Heather said, they can't get to work, they can't afford to get to work. It gives people surety that they can actually get to work and then get home again at each and every day. It provides business efficiency and continuity. That's just from our point of view, but it's also, it's more than just that. It's just gives access to people that may not have had it before. And there's the option there to partner with potentially some of the wider Whakatū businesses, whether that's in a financial sense or something, just to help get this idea sort of up and running. It could be two-pronged and do sort of a loop around Hastings and then drop the people off in Whakatū, and then at the same time a loop around Napier to drop people off in Whakatū as well. It's a service that would run at a different time to the normal bus services, so it doesn't affect it would capture underutilised capacity within the existing network. So buses could do a drop-off between the hours of sort of 5 and 6 o'clock and then potentially jump into the normal, usual bus route. So it's bus stops, buses, things like that that aren't used at that particular time. We could get more versatility out of that. Reliability would be critical for us and our people. They need to know that the bus will pick them up to get them to work. If they are relying on a bus, it needs to be able to turn up because they need the money, they need the reliability, the consistency. And as mentioned, fares would be a consideration. There is the option of partnerships and things like that to get this up and running. And it's not, it could also expand further to to Watties, Omahu Road, Onikawa, all those sorts of industrial areas that tend to run shift times. And anything further from you there?
No, I think that's, is that? Yeah.
Cool.
It's just really, our people, there's a lot of people who would like to work for us and they haven't got that transport. We do have also, there is definitely people who cannot afford the fuel to come to work. We work with a huge diversity. We have, our team, huge diversity of people, and there's struggles, and we want them on board. We want to give them a job, so that would be it in a nutshell, really. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you both. It's a great and constructive proposal. And it sounds, if I'm hearing you rightly, it's a proposal that might have some sort of what I call public-private partnership potential, partnering with the business sector and the council. We've got a policy to do with community trusts for more remote areas, but I'm sort of thinking maybe we should perhaps broaden that out to look at partnering with the community generally for this type of service. Is that sort of what you have in mind?
Yes.
And have you got any idea of what sort of numbers of people we might need to be transporting a day? Is it fairly fixed? Is it variable depending on people whether
Okay, so
sick
to
or?
fill a shift, it's 90 people.
Yeah, I understand
90
that.
people, so that's just at the east site, 90 people in the morning, and then 90 people again at night.
But for Whakatū as a whole, you got any idea of the numbers?
No, we do not, but there is a large industrial area there. It's, so there's T&G, Mr. Apple, Freshco, Silverfern Farms. Those are just the facilities off the top of my head. Yeah, so it could be the potential for quite a few. Yeah.
I was amazed, there's nearly 100 little actual businesses within that Whakatū area. And there's quite a few, there's quite a few small ones, but you've got Mr. Apple, you've got Freshco, you've got Silver Farms, you have NH Packaging. The list goes on, and all of them, you just got to see the road at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5:30. It's as busy as going down Pukapai Road and coming into the Whakatū area. It's all go. So there's a lot of people that come into that area in the morning. And then again, yeah, on the change of the shifts, you see, once again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any capacity, instead of, there's moving the mountain to Muhammad or the other way around, for shift times to be structured around the availability of bus services? Because if you're wanting, there wouldn't be a spare bus between 5 and 6.
No.
That's going to be peak time for everyone else. But if you finished at 4, is there any flexibility in your shift times, or do they have to be 8 till 5 kind of thing?
We'd be open.
Yeah, there's always
There's
potential,
definitely,
yeah.
we're always open to, both sides. I'm sure that we're only speaking on behalf, but it is something that has been spoken about too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, committee members? Linda?
Linda Stewart, Wakatai. Just a follow-on question from the chairs. So just to confirm, your T&G would be prepared to look at funding for this? That discussion's happened internally. And do you know if that's happened with any other businesses that are based alongside
We
you?
haven't had a conversation with any others. We've just done the survey of looking at how many industries are around, and
Right.
we know, but we haven't actually had a conversation with anyone else.
Okay, thank you.
Mr Chairman.
Go for it. Api.
What part of town would the workers be coming from? Have you done a survey?
Okay, so,
This is just TNG, not necessarily the
this is
wider area.
T&G, so primarily, predominantly in the Napier area, our people come from Maraenui, Onekawa, Tamatea, Napier South and Puramai, all right? And in the Hastings area, that's the Rorika, that's more or less all the suburbs there, Brimley, Akina, Flaxmere, Camberley, Mahora, Havelock North and Waipatu. So, yeah, it covers quite an area in the Hastings area. There's definitely other people on the fringes, but they would generally have their own transport. But yeah.
Right. Oh, Councillor Kerr?
Actually, a question to the staff. Could I please have a paper copy of this submission? Because it's been scanned onto,
Yes.
it's been scanned onto the website and I'm struggling to read.
Yeah.
More simple.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
If we could perhaps get a hard copy of all of them, or an emailed copy, because yes, they have. It was a real struggle to read some of the submissions. I managed it, but some difficulty. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your time and your great suggestion and idea with
Awesome
us.
submission.
Yeah.
Right. Do we have Carol Ann Gard with us?
I think it's the.
Good morning, Carol Ann. Did you hear the explanation of how it works today? You've got 10 minutes and...
Yes.
Okay, well, you fire away. We've got your written submission. The floor is yours. Tell us what you want us to hear.
Good morning, my name is Caroline Gard. I would like to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today about the challenges that disabled people face when accessing the public bus service. When there is no bus service operating in the smaller towns, it makes it harder to access facilities in other areas of the community. For example, I enjoy swimming as it is beneficial for my health, yet I rely on the bus to get to the pool, such as the one in Clive. It is difficult to travel to this location due to the timing of the bus service, as well as the difficulty that I have transferring between buses. This limits my enjoyment, yet if the My Way service, which works well for me, was extended to the other areas, I could easily go for a swim whenever I would like to, not when I'm restricted to do so. Other people experience similar challenges as I do with transport. So it is important that we have a fully accessible public transport option that is easier to use. It's concerning that other areas in our region, such as Central Hawke's Bay, do not currently have public transport service. And I would encourage council to provide a My Way service in these areas. It would work well for those communities. It is important to note that there is still room for My Way service, as even earlier this week when I was booking my trip, I was informed that there was going to be a 45-minute wait for a bus. I had to catch a taxi instead to connect with bus 12 heading from Hastings to Napier, otherwise I would have been late for my appointment. This meant my trip was more expensive and it was stressful to organise the taxi at short notice. To improve on this, there needs to be more My Way operating to meet passengers' travel requirements. Also, the ability to book a trip in advance, such as the night before, would be really helpful when you rely on the bus as your only means of travel. In respect of the cost of a public transport, council should consider providing an accessibility concession similar to what is available in other areas of New Zealand. This would remove any financial barriers for those with a disability, which may prevent or limit them from using bus. Also, disabled people sometimes require a support person to use the bus, and there shouldn't be any extra cost for someone if they need help. It may also be useful if there was some sort of identification card or symbol added to the B card so that a disabled person could use this to communicate with the driver if any extra help is needed. Also, from a safety point of view, it would be good if all of the bus drivers had a disability awareness training so that they would understand how their actions may affect a passenger. For example, some of your bus drivers don't wait for people to take their seats, and I have gone flying into other seats of the pole or a pole when driver has taken off before I was seated safely. This was painful and could have resulted in a serious accident. In the future, council needs to have a better communication about any changes to the bus service. For example, there was not much information available when the payment card changed to the B card, and also when the My Way service started. I only found out from a friend that I could no longer catch my regular bus, and I didn't know where to go to find out about this new service. Please ensure that any changes that result from the transport plan are clearly communicated to everyone in the community in lots of different ways so that we are all informed. Thank you for your time today, and I hope you consider everything that I have put forward.
Carol, and I would like to thank you for your time today and for bringing issues to our attention which we may not have the access to that from your life experience you do. It's incredibly important that our service has equitable reach to all parts of the community, and we very clearly hear the message that we need to do better for our less able community. So with those comments, do we have some questions? Mayor Walker.
Thank you, Carol-Ann, for your submission. It's raised some really important issues. I just want to talk about the last thing you raised, which is if we're changing parts of the public transport system to that it needs to be well communicated. What does that look like for you? Where do you see the communication needing to come from?
I don't read the newspaper, and I don't get a lot of information on Facebook or your website just because I have restrictions with the internet. I would probably be reading it more on your back of your buses when I'm actually on the bus to know that there's going to be a change.
Which gives you plenty of notice too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
It makes a lot of sense. People who are on the bus, they use the bus, tell the people on the bus what the change is going to be. Don't put it in the newspaper or on the Facebook. It makes a lot of sense. Well done. Yeah. Clever.
Other questions?
Just a comment.
Yeah,
I think it's really powerful what you said.
Carry on. Yeah.
Sorry. It was really powerful what you said, that bus for some people is the only way of travel.
Yeah.
You know, and most people here in this room don't quite understand what it actually means for someone.
May I invite you council members to actually come along and sit with someone that has a disability and sit on the bus and actually see what we have to go through every day. Because how else are you going to learn if you actually don't come in and sit with us? And I would actually like to sit with you guys and work alongside you guys to get things
right
in a way that we can not be stuck in a corner and be forgotten about.
Carol-Ann, I've got a question picking up on that. There are some policies in our plan to ensure that our bus design and our bus stop design is compatible with the accessibility requirements for the less abled. What I'm wondering is if whether you would agree the policy ought not to be expanded to require that we actually engage with the communities, the users themselves, in all of those design issues, driver behaviour, the whole gamut, buses, stops, fares.
Yeah,
use of
there's a whole
highway.
lot, because there's some people that will be restricted to be able to reach a bus stop, especially when it's raining.
Yes.
And there's not enough, like you've got poles that are standing up that don't even have any shelters, and how many meters do you have to walk down to the nearest bus shelter
Understand.
when it's raining or if it's really hot? Because not just that, with me trying to go to Clive and using the swimming pool there, you've got to go all the way to the BP and walk right down the corner. Have you ever thought about maybe putting a bus stop a bit closer to your swimming pools in the Hawke's Bay area?
Good point.
That's not so it's not so hard for people that have that disability to walk.
Understand. Look, Carol-Ann, thank you for bringing so many important issues and suggestions to our attention, and we will, I promise you, follow up on that information.
Maybe a field trip on the bus.
Yes, so...
Mr Chair, sorry,
Yeah.
does the Regional Council have a disability reference group that they...
That's what I'm just thinking about. Look, we'll come back to this in deliberations, but I mean, it seems to me that as we engage with everyone else, we should be engaging with these communities in the way we design this service, top to bottom, side to side. Right. And on that note, I think our next submitter will be speaking in similar vein. Michelle Lucas, if you're here.
Thank you,
Thanks, Caroline.
Carol-Ann.
Thank you very much indeed. No.
Oh, sorry.
Start whenever you want.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was just waiting for everybody. Kia ora, everyone. Big shoes to fill after coming on after Carol Ann. So thank you, Carol Ann, because she's obviously made it very real to you all what our disabled community are experiencing on a daily basis, particularly when it comes to public transport, as that is probably one of the biggest barriers to participation in the community. So yeah, huge thank you, Carol Ann. That was amazing. So I obviously work for CCS Disability Action as an access coordinator. So part of my role is to advocate for improvements in accessibility. And as you would have seen in my submission, there's a few suggestions in areas that can be improved with the transport plan, but it's all room, or if you put a bit of time and investment in these areas, you can get some really amazing results. So that's sort of very briefly speak to what I was really worried about. But I guess achieving fully accessible public transport is just a really important goal for numerous reasons. It's been amazing to see how successful the on-demand My Way service has been for our community, but and then the commitment from council to actively work with our community as well has been great. And especially we've got a new role with Natasha Harris stepping in as Sustainable Transport Advisor, and she's doing some really good work already connecting with the community. And so going forward, I can see just that continued collaboration being really rewarding, and I guess essentially co-designing that service to make it worthwhile. But yeah, it is an important service to get right for a whole lot of different reasons, especially if we're looking to extend it to other areas of the region, because it will really connect our community so that they do have the same opportunities that everyone else takes for granted. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So the other reason why it's quite important is from a financial point of view too. When you think about how much money investment is put into the total mobility scheme, it's still problematic for a lot of different reasons with our disabled community that utilise that service, because there is quite a lot of cost involved. And I know that the government is about to review that, and there'll be some recommendations that come out of that. But just to give you an example of one of the people we support through CCS, she actually works full-time in Napier and resides in Havelock North, but her cost to get into for her to just be able to continue in employment, that trip is $85 one way. That's inclusive of a hoist surcharge. So she's looking at $165 a day to get into Napier from Havelock North. And then, this is just one example. Unfortunately, Regional Council is able to subsidise about $37.50 a trip, which is still, obviously that's a substantial cost that is relieved for her. But you're sort of looking at, that's $375 per week for council. She's still looking at $450 a week for herself to get to work. So she is really, unfortunately, totally committing all her earnings to just be able to remain in employment. So there's no room for her to go out and do anything socially outside of that. So, I mean, just to round that up, that's a cost to council at $19,500 a year. Then for her transport cost is $23,400 per year. So that scheme, unfortunately, with the investment that council has put in, still doesn't work for a lot of our community. And that's just one example. And this is why, if we got the My Way service working correctly, this would be a service that would work well for her. And some might say, why does she live in Havelock? There's a whole nother complicated reasons why she can't move to Napier. Accessible housing is another huge issue for our disabled community, so it's not realistic. There's no opportunities to work around that. So we really need to get this public transport working well for our community, and that's just one example of many. And it's a really important scheme, but we really need to get a little bit more creative in how we make that funding work, and hopefully the government might give us a bit of clarification around that. But at the moment, those are kind of the hard facts for a lot of people, and it's just limiting them in a lot of ways. I've mentioned, and Carol Ann has, the accessibility concession has been really successful in the other regions that have adopted it, and I would encourage that council looks into that and what you might be able to do for our region in that space. And obviously the fare exemption for a support person, that just needs to be implemented as soon as possible, really. And I know that you'll probably look favourably on that for the reasons why. Sorry, I really am croaky today. I think to really get a good understanding that feeds on probably from a lot of submissions that you've heard today and will continue to hear, is there probably would be a lot of value in commissioning some dedicated research to understanding the journeys not taken for our community and the reasons why that's taking place. So I would highly and strongly recommend that some dedicated research is done in that space, and then that will inform decisions going forward, so there is some confidence that whatever public transport plan and the way it looks, that we are meeting our community's needs, and that collaborative, I guess, ongoing consultation with groups in the sector, with our disabled people and other groups that are reliant on public transport, but it still isn't meeting their needs. I think that research will uncover what's going wrong, where the opportunities are to make some positive changes. So yeah, and just reiterating the importance of ongoing engagement is really important. Obviously, there's a little bit of work to do when it comes to transport infrastructure that supports public transport, and I know that sits a little bit outside of regional council, but I just encourage just to continue working with our territorial authorities and looking back to government on getting that right. It's sort of suggested that within a 500 metre radius that you need clear access routes to be able to get to your bus stops to make it a viable means of transport. So that's something to kind of look into. But I'd also highlight, if we're going to have a successful MyWay service, how important it will be to have drop-off zones located in the right areas so that you can go dropped out outside of something like the Clove Pools or other key zones and areas throughout the council, throughout the region. The disability awareness training, we have already supported council with delivering some of this for our MyWay bus drivers, and that's been really successful. I'd encourage, we'll obviously work with Katie and the team to continue to do that, which is great, but I'd actually take it a step further, and any transport providers should facilitate and participate in that training. And we also would encourage the council staff as well, and that we've actually developed an e-learning platform, so that's a really easy thing to do and to deliver that training. And lastly, just I guess just with regards to public transport, it's just to ensure that it's responsive and flexible to our community's needs, especially when there's big events. That sort of kind of creative approach to that as well. So, but yeah, very briefly, that's probably what just to cover that. But thank you.
Well, again, thank you, Michelle, and for reinforcing the points that Carol Ann had made in such a comprehensive way. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Both presentations have been very worthwhile. A question I've asked others is, what's the most important point? Is it the cheapness of the fare, the time saving to get from A to B versus using another means, the frequency of the public transport, or the location of that pick-up, drop-off point? I'm really interested. You may have two or three.
Well, when you think about a disabled person, they're all going to have very different experiences and requirements. So actually all of those areas are really important to get right, because what might affect someone would be maybe just the actual access and mobility to a bus stop would be completely different for someone else who might be transport disadvantaged due for financial reasons. So it's not an easy fix. It is quite complicated, so you can't just focus on one of those areas. You really need it to be quite holistic in your approach. So unfortunately not an easy answer, where that's why having some research in that space and understanding and hearing the people's voices from the community will help kind of guide that process. But it is, yeah, everything's important for different reasons for different people. So.
May I ask a second question?
Councillor Lambert, do you want to do a question first?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've lost my train of thought now.
Oh, sorry.
My apologies.
While you're confused, Councillor Kerr, can you just tell me what CCS stands for?
So at CCS Disability Action, our original founding was Crippled Children's Society, but we've moved on from that for obvious reasons, because language is evolving and will always change and will continue to change. Even just our description of when we speak about disabled people as the social model, and that will continue to change. So yeah, that's what our foundations were.
I found it.
Go.
My question was the sense of us inquiring into not necessarily those that are on the bus, but those that can't get on the bus, is where you're saying we need to do some research in that space.
Yeah, when you start to really listen to the community and what the challenges are, there is just a whole group of people, what people would refer to it, that it's the journey's not taken, all those sitting at home that aren't accessing the community for a number of reasons. And that's, I think, if you really want a successful, sustainable public transport, that's where we need to hit the mark and really understand what is it, rejiggling or getting a better footpaths to lead to that bus stop. I think a lot of those infrastructure challenges will, when you've got a really good service like the My Way service, that will address some of those issues. And the other, I didn't speak to it just then, but the community transport providers is the other sort of approach to us to really get a little bit more investment and strength in that area, because they will, fortunately, the missing link for a lot of the communities, especially in rural locations, would be those community transport providers, and strengthening that service as well is really important.
Thank you. And just
Fiona, we are out of time, Councillor Kerr.
are you able to help us with that?
Love to.
Thank
you.
Thank you very much indeed, Michelle. And yes, we will definitely follow up on the invitation there.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. If we could now hear perhaps from Blanche Paiwai Ashcroft, if she's here.
Morena. Kia ora. Kia ora koutou katoa. Ko Blanche Paiwai Ashcroft tuku ingoa. Ko Sport Hawke's Bay o Mahi. And I am the Disability and Inclusion Advisor at Sport Hawke's Bay. I am here today representing the Regional Disability Group, which was created in 2020, and they established their strategy in 2021. And part of that strategy was to ensure that disabled people within Hawke's Bay have access to any forms of physical, recreational or play activity that they would like to get to within our region. So when I wrote my submission, I simply pointed out, answered the questions that were asked on the submission, linking into what we thought was important to address. So foremost, I would like to commend the work that Natasha from the My Way service has done with one of our representatives on our group, Hamish. She has worked really collaboratively beside him to make sure that the services that are offered there meet his desires. So he has an intellectual disability, and when the service started up, he was struggling. He was struggling with the app, he was struggling to book the service, but Natasha and Katie both took on the role of really working collaboratively with him to ensure that the service became more adjustable for him. I would recommend and support what Caroline has said, working alongside the disabled community will give you the best insight to ensure that the services you offer can cater to the needs that they have. So with the My Way, well actually first off I'd like to say with the buses that you are proposing, the new route that you are proposing, I think that having the loop coverage, I think that is very beneficial. The less bus stops does cause more barriers for those people that are unable to get to those bus stops, not just with an intellectual but also a physical disability. And if it's raining, if it's raining and the closest bus stop is a couple of blocks away, you have someone that has an amputee or cerebral palsy, that's a long walk for them in the rain, so that would just deter them from taking the trip altogether, which means if they decided that they wanted to go for a swim that day, it was pouring outside, the bus stop's too far away, they're just not going to do it, they're going to stay at home and stay on the couch, which is what we don't really want. It's not only caters to their physical well-being, obviously getting out, but the mental health attributes and the social interaction that they gain from those activities can just do so much for a person, as we all know. Which then leads me on to talking about the My Way services and how maybe increasing these services can support those needs. If they are able to access something like the My Way, then they can still use the public transport, but use the My Way to fill that gap which is then created for them to actually go out into the rain. But it's also more about going back to Hamish, who was on the committee at the regional disability group that we hold. He has said that by having this My Way introduced, he's now thinking about going out and flatting. He's never ever thought about that before because he was just never given the independence because public transport is his only use of transport other than relying on his mother. So I think that would be a huge milestone for him, and I think that would be a huge milestone for anyone else that would be coming out. Their independence to get to the activities that they want to get to branch out, go flatting, go to the coffee shop, all of those sorts of things is just massive. Something that we sitting around this table take for granted day to day. Something with someone with an intellectual disability. They don't have the luxury of that. So just giving them those luxuries that we have is going to be massive. And I do tautoko the concession cards. You do go on a bus and sometimes people do need a support person. The support person has to pay, even though the reason that they're going on the bus is for the individual. However, if you take a taxi ride, you're only paying that one person, that one fare for however many people are in the vehicle. So just kind of thinking along those sorts of lines, but also thinking, so we have the Disability Resource Centre, so that's DRC, and they take their clients, they have adult clients coming in for recreational purposes, and they take their clients out to places to go golfing, to go swimming. They only have their vehicles that they have on site, but if they had access to go on the public transport, to go out to pools, and all of their staff could go with it, removing that barrier or decreasing the barrier of the fare, but then allows that whole group to go out together and experience the joy of riding on the bus together, going to an event which they may not have thought they could go to because they only have one vehicle, that fits only 8 of them in there, where there might be 10 on that day or 12 on that day, plus the staff. And it's the same again for the special schools. So Kōwhai, Hohepa and Fairhaven. So Fairhaven and Hohepa, obviously in the Napier area. I do know that there is plans for like the My Way service to come over to Napier and things like that. Something else that would be good would be to see that Napier residents can go to Hastings, Hastings residents can go to Napier. And I would also like to talk about our participants that we have done in the Central Hawke's Bay region. I am Central Hawke's Bay based myself. There's nothing down there which gets an Otani residents to Waipak unless they pay a taxi fare. Now, the taxi fares that we have down there are considerably more expensive than the taxi fares we have up here because of our population. Having some form of public transport down there would be amazing, not just for our disability community, but for our community at Te Aute College, all the way through to our community at Takapo. It would just be amazing to get students into their sports and giving them their independence. And again, for our elderly community as well, to have that independence, to get out, do their groceries, maybe go watch their mokopuna, play a game of mini ball on a Friday night, all of those sorts of things, and engaging in all the fun things that we have down there in Central Hawke's Bay as well, like the park runs on a Saturday morning. It just kind of opens up those freedoms for our individuals. And the last thing I would like to touch on is the communication of the timetables and any changes. Technology is amazing, but it's not amazing for everybody. And I think what was said earlier about information being put on the buses is also amazing, but they're not just limiting it to that, having it widespread, trying to reach as many people as you can, whether it be email users, maybe people could sign up to being like a high use user and get put in a database, and then comms can be shared through emails if that's what they want, or postage as well is another good one, because that's another thing that people with a intellectual disability use quite a bit, because the technology just isn't good for them. And that's me. Thank you for your time.
No, thank you, Blanche. Again, there's a lot to think about in what you've said. So, committee members, questions? Yeah, Walker.
Kia ora, Blanche, fantastic submission. Just picking up on you, there's some commentary from the reference groups about the appetite for rail in Central Hawke's Bay, but also My Way and also the bus public transport. So I get the feeling that it's pointing to an integrated transport system kind of view, like not everything solves everyone's problems.
Yes.
But we had a view expressed earlier that accessibility to a train is easier than to a bus. Was there any conversation about that in your reference group members?
Yeah, I suppose that obviously with most rail services, the platforms are made level, and so it is easier to step on and off, as opposed to a bus service where you're standing on a footpath and there is that step up. So if you're thinking about someone that isn't able to lift their leg up or is in a wheelchair, even our mummies with their prams, it's just a lot easier to get on and off that railway because it's flat. Yeah. And it just makes it so much more accessible for them.
Thank you.
And I think also having a few multiple options for the Central Hawke's Bay community would just be amazing, because we do have a lot of shift workers that come up here at really outrageous times, and then we do have those of us that come up here just for our 9 to 5 jobs. So catering to everyone that we can. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Blanche. We're out of time now. So we have had 3 very meritorious submissions that have given us a lot to think about.
Thank you for your time.
And yeah, again, thank you for your information and bringing it to our attention. So we now need to and wish to hear from
James Howard from Transit, not Jen.
Okay, so we've got James Howard from Transit. Is that you on the screen that I can see?
Yes, it is.
Welcome.
Sure is.
You've got 10 minutes to use as you see fit. If you want to stop at about 8 to leave some time for questions. We've read your submission, but tell us what you want us to hear.
Yes, sounds good. So kia ora katoa. My name's James Howard. I am the project manager for Transit Group. And also online, we've got Chris Candy, who is our transition manager here in the Hawke's Bay. And Chris has got some really good in-depth knowledge from his experience from roles in public transport within the area. So it is great to be here today and an opportunity to present. We may be new faces for some of you, so we look forward to partnering with you all to assist in the delivery of this RPTP. So our submission in this RPTP is based on our experience in delivering high volume and innovative, reliable public transport services throughout New Zealand, and from our experiences in engaging with operators worldwide. So as a 100% Kiwi owned and operated business, we are here for the long term and take a long-term lens to ensure the viability of public transport throughout New Zealand. So as such, regional New Zealand is vitally important to us. We invest heavily in apprentices, electric vehicle expertise, local infrastructure and community programs. So adding to our written submission, we've included some additional points that we believe that will enhance this RPTP. So in general, Transit is supportive of this roadmap for public transport in the region, with the frequency and route coverage paving the way for incentivising current car users to use public transport. So specifically, route number 12, with the route changes proposed, Hawke's Bay Regional Council should be aware that there have been complaints historically in the past from residents who don't like buses travelling through their backyard in Frimley in particular. So maybe a bit of a solution here is we need to have a high engagement approach with residents so they are aware of these changes and the net positive benefits to ensure that this is successful. Route 11, with a significant increase of workers in the Whakatū area, changes to assist in being able to get these workers to and from work with public transport could be done sooner rather than waiting until 2025. Next, driver safety and wellbeing is an important consideration with those potential late night services in Flaxmere. So we'd encourage everyone here to have a think about how we could ensure that drivers do feel safe whilst providing those late night services. We also see significant potential for commuters in and out of Havelock North travelling to EIT and Napier. So that's the services viable. We suggest that partnering with the key stakeholders such as EIT for timetable development and route design would also net really, really good results. So of particular interest to transit is the commuter service proposed from Central Hawke's Bay through to Hastings. So we are fully supportive of the service. We transport a large number of school students on our MOE school services under an agreement with the MOE until the end of this year. A commuter style service would be well used, we believe. It has got a fantastic base number of students, and then adding to that is the commuters travelling in and out of Hastings. If this service was guaranteed operating under the public transport network, it would provide certainty to many, many families in the Central Hawke's Bay. So Transit does operate a similar style service between Whanganui and Palmerston North, which captures both school students and commuters, and it works really well. This service uses a coach in recognition of the speed zones and longer distances that this service travels on. So we did a bit of analysis of the wider roadmap as well. So as an experienced operator with transitions and expanding our services, we see very few challenges in respect to driver recruitment, vehicle procurement and infrastructure to deliver these changes for the wider community. As these changes are staggered, the big risk items that we see, such as procurement of vehicles and recruitment of drivers, has a clear roadmap for everyone to see. It enables planning for long lead time items such as vehicle building to take place. Another consideration is the timetables and the impact on driver shifts. So in creating the timetable for these new services, consideration needs to be given to the impact on driver shifts. With a number of regional councils around New Zealand attempting to minimise or even eliminate these undesirable split shifts, we strongly suggest that Hawke's Bay Regional Council follows that same path. Having a 4-hour unpaid period between, let's say, 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. is really undesirable and can make attracting and retaining drivers a real challenge. Next, just around the transition to a zero-emission technology. The complex and expensive transition to zero-emission vehicles should not be underestimated. This is likely to take some time due to the capital required from bus operators, which is ultimately passed on to Hawke's Bay Regional Council and subsequently ratepayers. With the 2025 and 2030 changes, consideration should be given to the MOT requirement for new bus purchases to be zero emission only from 2025 and zero emission buses in the entire public transport fleet from 2035. It's a massive challenge with 2,500 buses providing public transport throughout New Zealand and only 120 or so electric buses. There's a big challenge ahead of us. So in the interim, specifying a high standard of diesel vehicles during the transition is a practicable and cost-effective solution. It will ultimately prevent Hawke's Bay from becoming a network where older, higher polluting buses are used prior to transition. So in summary, we are more than happy for any of our team and various expertise to be made available to discuss any components of our submission that may arise in the future to enable Hawke's Bay public transport to grow. So thank you for your time and happy for any questions.
Yeah, look, thank you very much, James. Just a question I had. What solutions do you see to the split shift issue that you've raised?
I think well, first of all, it's encouraging people maybe not to travel at peak whilst having or bumping up peak fares or lowering off-peak fares and having a look and saying, hey, do we actually need all of these peak services? I think there can be a little bit of work done there. So incentivising off-peak travel and disincentivising peak. There will always be some peaks, but it's trying to smooth them out as best as possible.
So is that a conversation we need to have with our general business and employment community around flexi time?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that Wellington is trying to achieve, and so is Auckland. I know they're bigger cities, but the peaks are a lot greater. But flexi time is a really, really good solution, I think.
Thank you. Mayor Walker.
Thank you very much. Just interested in your comments about the students moving between Central Hawke's Bay and Hastings, and thank you for your comments on that. My understanding is that we've got about 50 to 60 students that are kind of termed the overflow currently, where their welcome on the bus service is going to run out at the end of this year. Is that right? And is that the right sort of number? And have you got any more numbers that would be helpful about what that demand for students between Central Hawke's Bay and Hastings is?
Yeah, so what we do is we record student numbers on a daily basis. So we have the same driver who drives that service every day. So he records what schools those students are going to and what we, I guess, or the Ministry of Education deems as ineligible. We record those numbers on a daily basis. We operate a 57-seat bus on it at the moment, and I think the average load might be about 40-ish. So you might have about 25 to 30 ineligible students. That's just numbers off the top of my head, but more than happy to work with yourselves to firm up those numbers.
Thank you, that would be helpful.
Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much indeed, James, for taking the time to contribute to this process. Your insights as a service provider are greatly appreciated and valued.
Thank you.
The next submitter is, I think, Dylan, who's been waiting patiently all day. No? Josh, Josh, yep. I knew that. I got myself disorientated there. Josh, welcome to the table.
Me.
And Kate, goodness. We are an esteemed company here. And thank you to Central Hawke's Bay for your submission. You know how the system works. You've got 10 minutes starting now. Tell us what you want to hear.
Kia ora, I'm Councillor Kate Taylor. I'm here with Josh Lloyd, our General Manager, Community Infrastructure and Development. As well as looking at what we can do at the here and now, I believe this plan needs to be more high level, aspirational about what is possible in the future, such as rail, and when it might be possible. It's important to know, and for our community to know, to be told why rail isn't more prominent in the plan, more visibility about Hawke's Bay Regional Council's findings that a train service to CHB wasn't viable and why. I love the submissions from this morning, particularly from Blanche, Paula and Tiara, Carol Ann, who mentioned extending my way to CHB, and Horizon's mention of interregional networks, which is a whole other focus that this plan could look at. It's very important, particularly when I live in the southernmost township of Takapo that could be the next commuter hub to Palmerston North, given the interregional transport networks. Our submission is based on a quick survey we did online in Central Hawke's Bay after we felt that plan consultation didn't give adequate opportunity for direct comment on the CHB commuter trial or for CHB people's aspirations for future transport networks. So at this point, I'll hand over to Josh for more details on what that survey found.
Kia ora koutou katoa. So building on what Councillor Taylor has said, the bulk of our submission stems from our views as council, our technical officers, as well as the 383 submissions that we received to our survey over a 6-day period. I'm not sure if you're impressed by that number of submissions, but we certainly were. That is a tremendous amount of engagement to a survey in a short time when people are busy. So I think that speaks volumes to the level of interest in the topic. Our submission, I'll take largely as read, but we'll highlight some of the key topics. We are broadly in support of the plan as it stands and are thankful for the ability to contribute and to keep contributing, working through the process from here. We have heard from those who submitted to our survey that there is likely to be good uptake of the proposals for the CHB trial as it stands, but that the frequency of that could or should look to be extended to more services per day, as well as into the weekends and on public holidays. We did hear the feedback, like we've heard this morning from many, that there's strong interest in a train service. We understand that an amount of work has happened in the background on testing the viability of that, and we encourage the team here to communicate more about that work that has been undertaken. Respondents to the survey in majority suggested they would not be commuting for work purposes, but would be commuting for other reasons, such as shopping or hospital visits, again supporting a need to extend the service into weekends and public holidays and more frequent during the day potentially. We're in support of the proposed locations identified in Central Hawke's Bay of Waipukaro, Waipawa and Otani, but feel that further work is required to make sure there's suitable connections at both the Central Hawke's Bay end, especially for our rural commuters who may wish to come into those towns to use the service, and as well making sure that there is good focus on what happens when people get off at the other end, which has been spoken about today. We did hear feedback that many would not be as supportive as they otherwise may be if this resulted in an increase in rates, and recommend therefore that more information and clarity is provided on how the service would be funded. We heard a strong amount of feedback that the trial should be brought forward from the proposed implementation date of 2025 to next year, 2023. We recommend also, based on what we've heard from our community, that the plan looks to include more local Central Hawke's Bay community-led public transport options in Central Hawke's Bay, and that's in line with many of the comments we've heard this morning, and potentially building on the success of the MyWay system up in Napier and Hastings. So that is the bulk of our submission, which we will be happy to take questions on now. And again, thank you for the opportunity, and we look forward to remaining a part of the process from here.
Thank you for your submission, and equally for that survey that informed it. That was really powerful and helpful. And it's good to hear that we're on the mark, at least with some aspects of the new offering for Central Hawke's Bay. The question I've got in my mind is based on this, I guess, conundrum or challenge presented by the ratepayer concern. We want a train, but we don't want to spend a whole lot of money. We don't want our rates to go up. And those two things are not entirely compatible. So my question to you as representatives of your communities and understanding through the survey is what's most important here? Is it regularity of a service all throughout the day, buses or trains, or does it just have to be a train? What is most important, frequency and service for the spend, or the fact that it is a train?
Two things, if I may start. The same ratepayer questions would apply to a bus service for cost, as would to rail. We don't know those answers to either. So I put that question back to you to inform the ratepayers what the cost would likely be for both.
Okay, no, that's a fair point.
In terms of frequency, use, in terms of the different systems, I think we need to aim up here. If we've heard a lot from the chairman and from this committee, members of this committee, about climate change, about taking the right modal shift, about the future. So let's aim up here.
Okay.
Let's find out what the rail service can offer us. Let's find out how frequent we can get it. Let's find out how many would use it. Think up here, not just offer a bus in the mornings and night. Having said that, I was absolutely chuffed to see CHB in the public transport, full stop. But let's lift the aspiration and move those people, not just this way, but the other way. Rail goes right through.
Any other questions from members of the committee?
Yeah, if I look, I've been a frequent user of the Solway rail platform to go into Wellington. So instead of actually doing the really busy route and actually use the Solway system, have you got the capacity within CHB to actually have that? Because public transport often works really well if you actually are able to travel to that point and then from then on get on. and actually make the fast trip to Hastings or wherever you want to go to. Is there room within Central Hawke's Bay to actually create platforms where there is a hub so people can park safely, either by car or by bike or even walk?
I think, yes, the capacity was there because we still have to move a lot of our people into that to catch any commuter thing that starts there. So we would have to put our money where our mouth is, so that if we are going to get these commuter networks moving, then we actually need to create the spaces for the park and ride or the whatever it may be to actually bring our people into Takapo, Waipokoro, Waipawa, or Tane on the way through. There's a lot of communities that are outside those pickup areas that would still need to use it as well.
Subsequent question, please.
Yes, we have time.
Thank you. Also, in your survey, did you pick up from those who were surveyed that they actually could see that actually rail, although it may be more expensive from an environmental, from a climate change perspective, makes actually a lot more sense than just a rumbling bus going backwards and forwards?
Through the chair, that certainly is supported by some of the feedback in the free text that we heard in there about environmental kind of decarbonisation and greenhouse gas emissions reduction. Definitely people saw or understood or believed that rail was a greener option as well. But back to the chair's earlier question, I believe the bulk of the sentiment from the community was about usability and frequency and reliability of service. But we certainly heard the comments about environmental impacts.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much indeed. We have received that submission. It's been incredibly helpful and the message is clear. All right. Our next submitter is, according to my schedule, Ian McDougall.
He's just given his apologies. He's got a family emergency.
Oh dear. Well, we have got his written submission. In which case I see that Dr. Gwyn is with us and Margaret as well. And you are both scheduled to appear around about now. So if you'd like to take the seat up there, the way it's been working, you'd be quite familiar with 10 minutes. It's up to you how you use it. And if you want to allow some time for questions, we have read your written submissions, but you really have this opportunity to tell us what you want us to hear beyond what's already been submitted in writing.
So thank you for this opportunity. I just want to make one point to you. Climate change is upon us. It's not acceptable now for any transport plan that looks as far as 2030 and maybe beyond, not to mention how to reduce carbon emissions. For example, other councils have timetables for electrifying buses, but there is no such plan in your transport plan. And I would like to know from you, why is it not there? Why is there no idea about how to reduce carbon emissions? That's my submission to you.
All right. It sounds like you're inviting a conversation. I've got a question which I'm going to put back to you both. You would have presumably picked up from reading the transport plan that we are interested in achieving a step change in mode shift and getting people out of the cars from a 0.5% public transport patronage to a much higher patronage through a combination of more frequent services on the core routes and supplemented with My Way and community trust endeavours and what have you. Is it important that we have specific quantified metric targets for greenhouse gas emissions and talk about climate change in the language of the policy, or that we actually do what we know is needed to achieve those reductions?
You're meaning that hoping that people will use more public transport, walk and cycle, will be enough?
Well, not
reduce carbon emissions.
not so much hoping, but actually putting on the services to enable that to happen. Isn't that in line with what you were saying needs to be done?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, it is, but I just a question that it's enough.
I'm sure it isn't.
Anyway, Robin might like to.
Yeah. But that's the interesting conversation. I mean, because we could set all sorts of targets, but if people don't actually get on board because the services aren't there, then they're just pen on paper. So what do you
Well, how
think
about electrifying buses? There's no mention of that.
Right.
And as I said, other councils are doing this, so they're available. They're already in place in Auckland.
Right. Just been pointed out to me there is some mention of that, but I take your point.
I couldn't find it.
Robin.
We wrote our submissions entirely independently, as we had last year and on previous occasions, and found we'd said exactly the same thing. So we thought we should be heard together, because I too, I really have nothing to say to you, because you've ignored entirely what I submitted last year, which basically said you have to start with climate change. The other bits follow from there, but we need to know where we as citizens fit into your plans or what you intend to do. So faced by a supposed forward-looking plan which only talks about buses but doesn't give me any sense of how this fits in with air, rail, anything else, I don't really know what to say. My wife has more knowledge about buses than I do. I've used them very rarely. If I'm fit enough, maybe I should be using my bicycle more. My wife would find that rather difficult, I think. So, but I mean, I found myself looking at it from the point of view that, all right, well, Hawke's Bay has obviously got the two twin cities at the heart of its population, and it reaches out, in a sense, from there. But how does this fit with some wider plan? As far as I can see, we have obvious relationships with Palmerston North, potentially with Wellington. Those are the two most obvious, I think, which need to be involve rail, and what you propose with regard to those centres, because otherwise, how does the bus services that you're doing fit in with it, with the picture? So you've got short-term traffic and long-term traffic, in other words. I didn't feel I had anything much to say, because it was entirely to do with the short-range stuff I couldn't help with. So I simply found all I could say was, whatever it is has to start from climate change. We need to know your thinking. So my invitation is not to tell you, but to ask you, well, what is your thought on this matter? How do you see Hawke's Bay fitting into the national plan for transport dealing with climate change? Because I just had no sense of it, having read and made a submission.
Well, thank you, Dr. Gwynn. Can I just take you to page 7 of the plan, which says that the Hawke's Bay Regional Public Transport Plan has taken into account the GPS direction in relation to developing better travel options in climate change through creating a path for step change, through increasing the frequency and span of public transport services to meet the objective of better travel options and support emissions reduction, and the climate change objective by creating viable alternatives to driving, further supporting vehicle kilometre transport reduction targets. Now, that may be brief, but I was putting to you the prospect that we know that, and to say that we've completely ignored climate change when it's the #1 strategic objective of this entire council, and it permeates absolutely everything we do. I was just putting back to you that this is the time to get into the pragmatics and actually deliver on the ground what we know will achieve the outcomes. And have we really misstepped by not writing an essay about all of that and instead actually doing it?
Now, I don't think you've misstepped, but I think we, the public, need to be taken more into the framework within which you're operating, because it wasn't plain from the papers before me anyway what the framework was. But here it is an idea for the development of the the local bus services, okay. But, I mean, I would have thought, for instance, the services that go to Central Hawke's Bay, which we were just hearing about, have to depend in a bit. Have you got a rail corridor operative to Palmerston North? If you do, this has clear implications for how that bus line will develop. Without any discussion or framework, I couldn't put the pieces together.
Understand. Okay. Any other questions from members of the committee? All right. Well, can I just ask you this question? Do you support a doubling of funding for public transport to induce a step change in public transport take-up in the region?
You mean this will be more rates for us? That, I'm only asking the question. I don't have any objection to that.
Right.
But I'm presuming that's what you're meaning. It's an increase in rates.
Well, it is actually about 90% already programmed within our long-term plan, but yes, inevitably it does involve, with Waka Kotahi for funding support, additional ratepayer spend over that period. We can't just magic this up.
No, we understand that.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time and salient, prescient reminder of why we need to do this.
Challenge.
Thank you.
All right. I think we have Paul Utera.
That was a late submission, so that he may not be here.
Just on that, while I'm here, we have received a number of late submissions. We could do this now or in deliberations. We might as well do it now. I would like to move that we accept the late submissions. This is a council process endeavouring to encourage public participation, and it would be, this isn't a statutory deadline, we've set it. Would anyone like to second the motion that we receive the late submissions? Okay, does anyone, oh, well, I'll put the motion. Does anyone oppose it? Okay, in that case, I think we can say that we've resolved unanimously to.
So this is the ones that we
receive the late
received?
submissions.
Receive the
that you-
late submissions.
Yeah,
From.
they were largely in support of the rail option. Anyone oppose? Okay, I think we could say that that's carried unanimous. All right, are there any other submitters here today present who have not spoken and are scheduled to?
So Paul's time is in 3 minutes, so I don't know whether.
Should we just stand down for 3 minutes and see if he turns up? Right.
I suppose you're not getting that much out of today's meeting, are you? Up to this point. Sorry.
We move into lunch now. I have got someone I need to talk to at 1 p.m. on the understanding I'd be clear and we wouldn't start again till 1:30. If we do need to hear from the submitter, we'll start again at 1:20 if that's all right. So that we can get on with our our transport committee meeting as such. Thank you, everyone.
Can I make a suggestion that maybe councillor Charles blesses the food?
Could you do that, Councillor Lambert? Would you be able to say our karakia kai?
Yes, love.
Amen.